Chapter 14. Date, Christmas Eve. Location, Moscow, Russia. Local time, 2:27 p.m. 4 hours until Samoan/Apian delivery begins. The limousine ride back to the sleigh took even less time than the ride to the Grand Kremlin Palace had. Yet again, Snoot fiddled with the strand of Christmas lights, and yet again, Santa avoided eye contact with Evalia as much as he could. It was easier this time because she'd hardly looked away from Putin the entire ride. When they got out, Boris popped the trunk open to deliver their weapons to them. When he handed Cherry back to Santa, she weighed an extra 10 pounds thanks to the new hunk of metal attached to the bottom of her barrels. Santa glowered at Boris and then at Putin.
"What did you do to my shotgun?"
"Consider it a gift,"
Putin replied with a grin.
"I don't appreciate when people play with my toys."
Putin's eyes narrowed.
"That is literally your job. People play with your toys."
You know what I mean."
Santa glowered at him.
"What did you do?"
Putin handed him a belt loaded with army green canisters about twice the thickness of Santa's thumb.
"I had my men affix a military-grade grenade launcher attachment to the underside of your shotgun. It is a front-loading pump-action unit. All you have to do is load a grenade round, pump the action, hold the unit tight, and pull your trigger."
Alarm bells rang in Santa's mind.
"You messed with the firing mechanism?"
"Please."
Putin held his arms out to his sides.
"Even if you do not trust me, you cannot deny that I know what I am doing."
Santa grumbled, but Putin had a point.
"Next time, ask me first."
Putin had brought some sort of modified AK-47 with him, but Santa hadn't taken much time to examine it. Whatever it was, Putin certainly knew how to use it, and that was good enough for Santa. He grinned at Santa and said,
"Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho."
Santa rolled his eyes. Within minutes, they loaded into the sleigh with all their weapons. Santa and Snoot rode in the front with Puffsworth and Cherry between them, and Evalia and Putin rode in the back. At the sound of a feminine giggle, Santa looked back once. His neck wouldn't tolerate many more backward turns, so he faced forward and left them to their flirtatious devices. Putin said something in Russian to Boris, and Boris backed away from the sleigh and gave the customary Russian salute, comparable to an American salute, only with a more extreme arch to his back. Then Snoot engaged the Star of Wonder, and the sleigh lifted from the helipad and into the cool afternoon air. Santa gave the reins a light tug and cracked his whip, and Rudolph sprang forward, taking the sleigh along with him.
"As you can see, Mr. Putin, sir, the Star of Wonder prototype is fully functional."
Snoot glanced back at Putin as they ascended.
"I can scale it up in size for larger aircraft or spacecraft, and if I get enough funding, I can scale it down, too. Imagine an entire fleet of Starlight-powered drones that recharge day or night and can—"
Snoot glanced back again and frowned, then he faced forward and said no more. Santa pointed Rudolph to the southwest and turned back for his own look. Putin sat next to Evalia, but they locked arms and began nuzzling each other. Putin quickly advanced to kissing her neck, and Evalia gasped, all the while smiling, her cleavage heaving up and down with each shallow, impassioned breath. Santa whirled forward again. He definitely didn't need to see that. Snoot looked back.
"She's my cousin, you know."
That got Putin's attention. He stopped, although he didn't release his grasp on Evalia, leaned forward, and locked eyes with Snoot.
"Then it seems incestuous for you to keep watching, does it not?"
Snoot's mouth hung open, and he faced forward again. But he didn't retort. Instead, he pulled out his flask and took a long swig of Putin's vodka. The sounds of passion continued behind Santa. He tried to block them out, but he could only focus on how he wished he hadn't let Putin come along. Or that he'd put some plastic on the seats in the back.
"Thumpity thump thump,"
Snoot muttered.
"Look at Putin go."
Date, Christmas Eve. Location, an unknown island in the Bahamas. Local time, 8:06 a.m. 2 hours until Samoan/Apian delivery begins. Santa landed the sleigh with more of a thud than he would have otherwise, but Putin and Evalia's interactions had grated on him for long enough, and he wanted to make his irritation known, albeit passive-aggressively.
"We're here.
He'd set them down amid a smattering of picturesque palm trees scattered over nearly snow-white sand. It couldn't have been more than 65 degrees outside, but his jacket kept him warm on top of that. He wiped the sweat from his brow and took in the view.
I might have just landed on the set of a Corona commercial.
I see nothing but trees, sand, and salt water.
Ivalia stepped out of the sleigh, and Putin made no secret of staring at her from behind.
It is here, Kotionok.
Putin said. Snoot squinted at him.
What did you just say?
Kotionok. It means kitten.
Santa rolled his eyes, but part of him wanted to backhand Putin as well. Another part wished his own attraction to Ivalia would just go away. After all, he was married. He had no reason to be jealous. So why was he jealous?
Our satellites and aerial reconnaissance are precise,
Putin said.
We have detected sources of thermal energy emanating from this island. It is not considerable, but it is there.
Santa looked around again.
Underground?
Putin nodded.
I do not see any robot monkeys in the trees. Do you?
So we've got to find a way in,
Santa concluded.
This is gonna take forever.
Snoot sighed and pulled out his flask.
We've only got 2 hours until Christmas morning in Samoa, and this island is at least a few square miles. We might as well ring in Christmas Day with some fancy Russian vodka and plan to do better next year.
He plopped down in the sand, leaned against a palm tree proportional to his size, and leaned his head back for a swig. But the palm tree bent at an awkward angle, and he toppled over into the sand. Somehow he managed to keep all but a little splash of vodka from sluicing out of the flask, even as he cursed and railed against the malfunctioning palm tree. Not malfunctioning, Santa realized. Intentionally put there. Gears ground and clanked, and wood and metal groaned as a stairwell opened in the sand and descended into the island just to Snoot's left. Snoot sat upright, glowered at the stairwell, sighed again, and downed a glug from his flask.
Well, shit.
Indeed.
Santa hefted Cherry over his shoulder.
Come on, we've got no time to lose.
The stairwell, made of weathered steel grating and rails, dropped underground at a rate almost as steep as a freestanding ladder. Santa had to squeeze his girth through the narrow opening, but the stairwell widened further down. Snoot followed him, then Ivalia, then Putin, and Puffsworth swooped in after them and landed on Snoot's shoulder. As usual, Ivalia carried her crossbow and wore her blood-ore dagger strapped to her back. Putin wielded his tricked-out Kalashnikov, and Santa still hauled Cherry, complete with her new Russian grenade launcher edition, and still wore his bowie knife on his hip. He also wore the bandolier of grenade rounds across his chest on a diagonal from his left shoulder to his right hip. Snoot, by contrast, brought nothing except the strand of white Christmas lights, again wrapped around his torso from his left shoulder to his right hip. Even with the lights off, they looked more like a festive holiday sash than a badass commando accessory.
Why are you bringing those?
Ivalia asked.
They will only get in the way.
I'm working on something, okay? Didn't have time to finish it at the North Pole before we left because of those damn polar bears. And I've run into a few snags along the way, but it'll be ready soon.
Snoot folded his arms.
And besides, you never know when you might need rope or something comparable. Haven't you seen Boondock Saints?
Ivalia rolled her golden eyes.
Whatever.
The reindeer.
Putin motioned with his head up the ladder.
He will be all right alone.
We can't bring him down here,
Santa replied.
but it's the Bahamas. He's never had it so good.
They descended a few steps deeper into the island. Before long, a massive steel door rimmed in turquoise light loomed before them, set into the dark brown rock that formed the small passageway. A control panel next to the door awaited a key card and an entry code. Santa pointed to it and looked at Snoot.
Can you do anything with that?
Obviously.
Within 30 seconds, Snoot had the door open. He stepped aside and held out his arms in a mock bow.
You're welcome.
Puffsworth squawked, and Santa led them inside. Pipes and cables and wires and technology flowed along the steel ceiling, and grated steel floors carved paths into the rock walls that shaped out the entryway. Turquoise LEDs accented the floors and glowed from illuminated clocks of every shape and size mounted to the rock walls. As they followed the passage deeper into the island, Deeper into whatever compound they'd discovered, the rock walls ended, and walls of glass took their place. Santa raised Cherry and approached the first pane.
Watch my back.
Of course.
Putin replied. Santa pressed his back against the rock wall and leaned over to peer into the glass. Then his eyes widened and he stepped back.
What is it?
Evalia asked.
Unbelievable.
Santa nodded toward the window.
Take a look.
She did, and Putin and Snoot did as well. There, before them, encased in a sprawling cavern, towered at least 36 types of dinosaurs. And they were alive and moving. Long-necked beasts foraged for leaves from prehistoric trees. Other lizards, bigger than both of the zombie polar bears combined, grazed on grass near a pond where smaller dinos drank water. Greens, oranges, reds, purples and browns covered their scaly hides. Crowns of spikes adorned some of their heads, and massive horns protruded from the heads of others.
What the frost?
Snoot asked.
This is some Jurassic Park malarkey right here.
Not likely. I doubt he cloned them,
Santa said.
He's Father Time, remember? He's probably keeping them down here like it's a zoo, preserving the last of their species with his powers.
They're beautiful.
Evalia pressed her left palm against the glass.
And think of the armor a craftsman could make from their scales.
Putin smiled.
I like the way you think. I was just wondering what they taste like.
Evalia looked back and gave him a long grin with one eyebrow raised.
We're not barbecuing the dinosaurs, Santa said. They're ancient and otherwise extinct.
Look over there!
Snoot pointed across the corridor at the other set of glass walls.
There's more!
Across from the herbivores roamed the carnivores, a bit more camouflaged than their vegetarian counterparts with darker-coloured scales. Little ones, big ones, but none nearly as large as the mammoth beasts that fed on the highest leaves of the trees. Still, the sight of their claws and teeth urged Santa to keep far away.
It's all very nice and interesting, but we've got work to do, and almost no time to do it.
Santa waved them forward.
Come on!
They didn't get but 10 yards ahead when a voice cackled all around them. Father Time.
Well, well, look who it is. I'm impressed you found my little hideaway. But I'm even more impressed that you managed to bring President Putin with you. Oh, I'll admit he's about the last person I'd bring on a field trip to the zoo.
Putin leaned over to Santa.
He obviously has not seen the pictures of me playing with baby tigers. Which is weird because they are all over the internet. You might say I am the real Tiger King.
In any case, Santy, you're still too late.
Father Time continued.
Out of time, as it were. I have the timepiece right here with me, and I guarantee you won't reach it in time to use it for your deliveries. Oh, sorry. Perhaps you should have bargained with me, or at least taken my warnings more seriously. Oh well, maybe next year.
Hand it over, Time, Santa called back. You don't have to do this. You don't have to wreck Christmas for billions of kids across the world.
Oh, Santa, you're a holiday hoot. You know that? You are responsible for this Christmas's demise, not me. I set perfectly reasonable terms, and you failed to meet them, even when I tried to negotiate. This debacle rests squarely on your lumpy shoulders. But seeing as you've made it this far, I figure you're up for one last challenge. A prehistoric gauntlet, if you will. You've already survived undead reindeer, polar bears, and humans, but all of that was just a precursor to what I've achieved using a modified form of this virus.
More zombies?
Snoot scoffed.
Sounds like someone's relying on the same old trope and doesn't have any original ideas.
Not zombies, small one.
Father Time replied.
enhanced life forms, prehistoric perfection. Regardless of whether they're carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores, they can all kill you. Soon you'll be dead, and I'll get Mrs. Claus not just for one night, but for the rest of eternity. Toodles!
The intercom clicked off. Then a loud bang sounded behind them, and another bang shook the tunnel ahead of them. Both ends of the tunnel rumbled and collapsed, sealing them inside. Then the glass walls around them began to lower and recede into the ground. Before Santa's eyes, the dinosaurs convulsed, groaned, and roared, but unlike the reindeer, polar bears, and scientists, they didn't decay. Instead, they all stopped at once and turned towards Santa and the rest of his group. Then the dinosaurs started toward them from both sides. Snoot took a swig from his flask, swore, and growled,
This is getting really old.
Chapter 15.
Run!
Santa yelled it, but the others had already gotten a head start toward the herbivores' side. Santa rushed after them as quickly as his legs could carry his girth. Now he brought up the rear while Putin headed for the hulking reptiles lumbering toward them. Putin had made a calculated decision to opt for the slower, stronger herbivores rather than the quicker, meaner carnivores. It made sense until a stegosaurus 40 feet away whipped its tail. 4 curved spikes whipped past them and embedded in a nearby tree, just missing them. Ivalia glanced back at Santa as they ran.
I didn't know they could do that.
I didn't either,
Santa shouted. Ahead of them, a triceratops charged. Putin veered to the right, deeper into the herbivores' containment area, and Snoot, Ivalia, Puffsworth, and Santa followed. As the triceratops advanced, its scales rose up layer by layer, formed into rows, and flipped back down all across its body, changing its color from dark green to shiny reflective chrome.
That's probably not normal either,
Ivalia called back. The triceratops accelerated, shaking the ground as it approached. The others managed to maneuver out of its way, but Santa couldn't run fast enough. It lowered its head to gore him. At the last second, Santa skidded to a halt. The triceratops barreled past him and slammed into a boulder with a metallic clang and a droning roar.
Definitely not normal.
The triceratops righted itself and turned towards Santa again. By its position, it blocked him from catching up with the rest of his group. Gunfire ripped through the air beyond the triceratops. From what Santa could see, Putin was shooting at what looked like dozens of foot-tall dinosaurs skittering toward the group at breakneck speeds. Ivalia had joined in the fray too, launching bolt after bolt of violet energy from her crossbow. The metal triceratops scraped the ground with its front paws and lowered its head. Santa raised Cherry, even though no shotgun blast would take down a metal-reinforced triceratops. Cherry's weight felt off in his hands, and he remembered Putin's unwelcome addition. He plucked a grenade round from the belt across his chest, loaded it into the launcher attachment, and cocked the action. The triceratops charged. Santa braced Cherry against himself, aimed low, and fired. Cherry kicked his shoulder and spewed fire and smoke. The round detonated under the triceratops's head and forelegs and sent it hurtling through the air to Santa's left with another droning roar. An eruption of dirt, turf, and rocks peppered Santa. But at least he'd cleared his path.
So much for not barbecuing the dinosaurs.
He sidestepped the crater and ran to catch up with the others.
What the frost is going on here?
Snoot yelled amid the chaos.
When did the damned X-Men go prehistoric?
Neogenetics! It was another one of the divisions back at Admian Labs, Santa said. Father Time's been messing with nature again. He's mutated the dinosaurs.
Putin still clacked his AK-47 at the tiny, speedy dinosaurs, but Ivalia had given up on her crossbow and drawn her blue dagger. She carved through the little dinosaurs as they sped toward her and Snoot, their tiny mouths open and tiny claws bared. Behind her, Snoot screamed, flailed, and cursed while trying to peel one of them off his back, but his arms didn't reach far enough. Above them, Puffsworth flapped his wings and squawked as he tried to shake one of the dinosaurs free from his left foot. Santa reloaded the grenade launcher. cocked it, and fired a round into a couple dozen more of the little dinosaurs approaching the group. The explosion dug another crater and sent bunches of tiny, sizzling dinosaurs careening through the air. Putin and Devalia cut through the remaining tiny dinosaurs, stripped Snoot and Puffsworth of the ones harassing them, then turned to face Santa. He opened his mouth to say something, but two parallel beams of harsh red light knifed between them and scorched the grass black. They staggered back from the blast and looked toward the source of the light, halfway up to the ceiling. A nearby Brachiosaurus's eyes glowed red. It emitted a deep, rumbling moo, and its eyes flared with fresh red energy.
Move!
Santa yelled. This time he led the way, leaping over the charred earth and running toward the center of the herbivore containment area. Putin unloaded round after round of ammunition at the Brachiosaurus's head as they ran, and Devalia sent a flurry of violet arrows into various other approaching dinosaurs to keep them at bay. All the while, the Brachiosaurus mooed and seared the ground behind them as they ran. Santa spotted a large steel door across the containment area, on the carnival side. With the tunnel collapsed behind them, that door was probably the only other way out. He turned toward it and hoped the others would follow his lead. As he did, a Stegosaurus, possibly the same one from before, stepped into their path several yards ahead. It raised its tail for another swing.
Get down!
Santa yelled, and he dropped to the turf. The Stegosaurus's tail lurched forward and flung a new barrage of spikes that zipped over Santa's head. A higher-pitched, distressed moo emanated from behind them. Santa turned back. Beyond Santa's companions, the Brachiosaurus's left foreleg buckled under it mid-step, and Santa caught sight of 4 long spikes protruding from its massive knee, courtesy of the Stegosaurus. The Brachiosaurus fell forward in slow motion, like huge things always do, with its mouth agape and its eyes still aglow with vivid red light. Eyes fixed right on Santa.
Stay down or run.
Better to keep moving.
Run!
He pushed up to his feet and started toward the Stegosaurus. It groaned and pulled its tail back for another swing. Santa glanced over his shoulder. Putin followed him the closest, then Snoot with Puffsworth flying just overhead, then Evalia. Behind her, the Brachiosaurus's chest hit the ground and sent a rumble quaking under their feet. Its long neck fell like Santa's whip at the end of a lash. Its red eyes flared brighter.
Cut left!
Santa shouted, and he broke left. Twin beams of red-hot energy sizzled past his right shoulder and ploughed into the Stegosaurus's side mid-tail swing. The Stegosaurus bellowed as the lasers split its torso in half. Another hard slam shook the ground, and the lasers stopped. Santa stole another look back and saw the Brachiosaurus's head bounce on the turf and then settled there, motionless. Somehow the lasers had missed them. All 4 of his companions still followed him. Half out of breath, he led them toward the carnivore sector, but a gust of strong wind repelled them. A sound, half shriek and half squawk, split Santa's eardrums, and a series of shadows darkened the ground around them. Santa looked up. Pterodactyls, at least a dozen of them.
Oh, not this again!
Snoot groaned from behind them. Santa smirked. More flying things that wanted to kill him? Easy. He raised his shotgun and fired at one of the pterodactyls. The round shredded the pterodactyl's wing and chest, and it dropped to the ground in front of Santa. Evalia and Putin fired as well, and Snoot wailed as one of the pterodactyls swooped down after Puffsworth with its long, pointed beak open. Puffsworth maneuvered away from it, but Santa couldn't risk firing his shotgun at it from his vantage. The angle was wrong.
Putin! Save the puffin!
When he'd woken up that afternoon, about the last thing Santa would have expected was to be shouting orders at the President of Russia to protect an Arctic bird from a rampaging dinosaur. But here they all were. Putin downed another pterodactyl and took aim at the one chasing Puffsworth. But before he could shoot, a bolt of violet light pierced the side of the pterodactyl's head, and it crashed into a tree with a satisfying crunch. Puffsworth looped back toward Snoot and fluttered over his head. Putin grinned at Evalia, who gave him a wink. Then she started shooting down the remainder of the pterodactyls. They continued to tear through the pterodactyls, firing at will, reloading when necessary. When only 3 remained, the pterodactyls lined up in a row and beat their wings hard and fast. Their wind gusts blew so strongly that Santa and the others could barely stay standing, much less take aim. Eventually, Santa dropped to the ground and dug his fingers into the turf just to keep from blowing away.
I have no shot!
Nor I!
I have an idea!
Snoot shouted, holding Puffsworth close to his chest. He nodded at a nearby prehistoric monstrosity of a tree. Santa couldn't have identified it in 65 million years.
Evalia, get over to that tree! Brace yourself against it and shoot!
As Santa and Putin watched, Evalia released her grip on the ground and let the wind lift her into the air. She turned toward the tree and extended her legs toward it as she approached. Her feet hit the tree first, but she landed as if she'd hit a soft piece of earth, as if doing so was as natural as rolling out of bed. Santa would have broken his back if he'd tried anything like that. Evalia leaned back against the tree, allowed the wind to pin her there, and clenched her crossbow with both hands. She raised it slow but steady, like a skinny guy struggling to lift a heavy barbell at the gym. Once she finally got it level with the pterodactyls, she squeezed off several bolts, all of which beamed forward, unencumbered by the wind. As she fought to control her aim, violet bolts streamed past the pterodactyls, and some even dug into the dirt around Santa, Snoot, and Putin. One hit next to Snoot's armpit, and he shouted a slew of profanity, but Evalia kept firing. Then one of the bolts struck the leftmost pterodactyl's head, blowing a hole clean through. Its wings stopped beating, and it dropped to the ground behind the other two. Dead. The wind persisted. Not as strong as before, but Santa still couldn't force himself to his feet or control Cherry enough to take out the other two. Evalia had that covered, though. Out of her next 3 shots, 2 of them hit the next pterodactyl, one bolt through each wing in different spots. It screeched, and the holes ripped wide tears into the pterodactyl's wing membranes. The reduction of flappable surface area diminished the force of the wind, and Evalia's next shot took the pterodactyl down. Now able to withstand the gusts, Santa pushed himself to his feet and tried to take aim at the last one, but Evalia got it first with a violet bolt straight through its chest. He glanced back at her, nodded, and she smiled back. That's when he saw the pack of brown velociraptors emerge from the trees in the distance behind Evalia. They ran forward at an unbelievable pace and reached Evalia's tree before Santa could yell a single word. Evalia must have read the terror on his face, though. She froze perfectly still against the tree as the raptors bolted past. The foremost raptor leaped into the air, and as Santa raised Cherry to fire, a blast of white frost shot toward him from the raptor's mouth. He fired Cherry and hit the raptor, but the frost hit his left forearm. The raptor's lifeless body skidded to a halt next to him, but Santa's left forearm had frozen from his wrist up past his elbow, and a thick coating of ice covered it. Meanwhile, Putin unleashed bullet after bullet into the approaching raptors, and Evalia launched bolt after bolt at them from behind as they ran past.
Frosty snowballs!
Snoot shouted from next to him.
Your arm is frozen solid! What did that thing do to you?
Santa frowned at his arm, squeezed his fist tight, and forced his arm to bend. The ice shattered, but it didn't cause him any harm. Snoot's eyes tripled in size.
What the frost did you just do? How is your arm still attached to your shoulder, much less functioning?
I'm Santa Claus.
He smirked at Snoot.
The cold never bothered me anyway.
Snoot pointed behind Santa.
Look out!
Cherry whirled toward an approaching raptor, and Santa followed. She discharged a blast that all but severed the raptor's head from its body, and it slumped to the ground.
Stay near me, and stay behind me.
Santa broke open the action, ejected the spent shells, and quickly loaded 3 fresh ones. He snapped Cherry back into a straight line and blew away another raptor just as its mouth opened to spray him with ice. Beyond him, Evalia leapt into the prehistoric tree and rained down violet bolts upon the raptors. But a group of them gathered along the back of the tree and started coating its thick trunk with ice. Santa downed another pair of raptors, but while he reloaded Cherry again, the raptors behind Evalia's tree rammed their muscular bodies into the frozen trunk. Cracks ripped through the trunk. The ice shattered and the tree trunk buckled. The ancient tree toppled backward, away from Santa, and Evalia fought to steady herself as it fell. Santa roared for Putin to help, but he'd gotten himself trapped in a circle of raptors slowly closing in on him. He'd be fine, Santa knew, but he couldn't provide any aid to Evalia. So Santa charged forward, leaving Snoot behind. Evalia emerged from the branches of the downed tree, also encircled by raptors. 4 of them by Santa's count, with 2 more on the way. As Santa kept running toward her, Evalia fired a round from her crossbow, nailed one of the raptors in the head, dropped it, and drew her dagger. The remaining raptors encircled her, their mouths open and icy. She ducked under the first stream of frost and rolled toward one of them with her blue dagger ready. In one swing, she severed its left leg at the knee. Then she split its stomach open as it toppled over. She whirled around and jumped over another raptor's head as it blew ice at her. The raptor twisted around as she landed, but her dagger carved deep into its neck before it could blast her. It dropped dead right then and there. Now within range, Santa took aim at the next raptor. But Evalia spun and stepped toward it, taking away Santa's chance for a safe shot. But before Evalia could strike the raptor down, its icy breath hit her right arm, welded the dagger to her hand, and froze her arm up to her shoulder. She screamed, fell to the ground on her left side, and clutched her frozen, useless arm. The raptor arched over her with wisps of white vapor streaming from its open mouth. Its head reared back to deliver a condemning blast of ice. Santa fired Cherry high so as not to hit Evalia, and the buckshot flayed the scales from the right side of the raptor's head. It screeched and fell to the ground, and Santa hurried over and bashed its head in with Cherry's stock. The final two raptors went down with 2 easy shots before they could advance within range, but they'd inflicted enough damage as it was. Evalia could easily lose her arm from the ice. Santa helped her up and took great care not to put any pressure on her right side.
We can reverse this. It's warm enough in here that you'll thaw out soon, and if we can find a heat source, we can prevent most of the nerve damage.
She just groaned, clenched her eyes shut, and bared her perfect teeth while they walked. Ahead, Putin had eliminated the remaining raptors surrounding him, and Snoot emerged from behind a nearby rock with Puffsworth on his shoulder. Aside from Evalia's moans and those of the few surviving dinosaurs who lay injured in the group's wake, no sound flowed through the containment area. Putin and Snoot rushed over to Evalia. Putin brushed shards of ice off his coat and shoulders and took hold of her left side, replacing Santa.
What happened?
One of the raptors hit her with ice, Santa replied.
How did you
Evalia winced. Then she looked between Santa and Putin.
survive their ice breath? Either of you.
Putin grinned.
My love, the cold never bothered me anyway.
Why does everyone keep saying that?
Snoot growled.
The movie wasn't even that good. Plot holes galore. Just let it go already.
Don't move your arm. If the ice breaks, you may lose the entire limb.
Putin turned to Santa.
We have to get her
To a heat source, I know. There wasn't anything behind us, and even if there were, we couldn't get to it anyway with the tunnels caved in. We have to press forward and hope for an answer.
Putin nodded.
The door is just ahead. Let's go.
They proceeded ahead with Santa in the lead, reloading Cherry as he went. He picked up Evalia's crossbow along the way and tossed it back to Snoot.
Carry this! Figure out how to shoot it if you can.
Snoot fumbled it but eventually got a good grip. He muttered something and Puffsworth squawked from his shoulder. Before long, the massive steel door loomed overhead. A control terminal to the right beckoned Snoot over, and he slung Evalia's crossbow over his unoccupied shoulder. From behind, it looked almost as big as he was. He tapped some commands into the terminal.
Old system. Shouldn't be too hard to crack this baby open.
A few more clacks on the keyboard later, and the door groaned. It lifted slowly, almost ominously. Gears ground and chewed from the inside. As Snoot backed away from the terminal, Santa started toward the door.
Wait!
Putin hissed. Santa stopped and looked back. Both Putin and Evalia gawked, horrified.
Smoking sleigh bells!
Snoot ran to hide behind Putin and Evalia, and Puffsworth honked. The door opened fully, revealing a dark brown adult Tyrannosaurus Rex. It roared so loudly that it shook the containment area and it stepped toward them. Santa rolled his eyes, loaded a fresh grenade into Cherry's attachment, and fired it at the T-Rex. The grenade hit the T-Rex square in its chest and exploded. Chunks of flaming T-Rex flesh burst into the air, and it staggered back a few steps with a higher-pitched roar than before.
Come on!
Santa turned and motioned the others forward with his head.
We've got to keep moving.
But they didn't move. Putin just pointed at the T-Rex. Santa turned back in time to see the smoke clear from the T-Rex's chest, revealing a bloody, gaping hole from the explosion. But the T-Rex was somehow still standing. Then Santa understood why. Before his eyes, new flesh and scales knitted together in the T-Rex's chest, until the wound sealed up completely. Only a smattering of blood oozing down its torso indicated that it had ever suffered harm in the first place. Now Santa gawked too. The T-Rex could heal itself.
We are so screwed!
Snoot said. The T-Rex rumbled forward. Santa loaded another grenade, cocked the action, and fired this time at its leg. The blast struck the T-Rex below the knee and blew off its leg from that point down. The T-Rex toppled forward with a roar, but it caught itself with its other leg and steadied itself with its tail. It still blocked the door, and its leg had already begun to heal faster than its chest had before. But it couldn't come forward any farther. Yet. Perhaps they could evade it and circle around behind it to reach the door? Santa looked back. No chance of that. At least a dozen other dinosaurs, a mix of carnivores and herbivores, continued approaching from behind them.
This is some blustery bullshit,
Snoot said.
We're trapped!
Puffsworth landed on Snoot's shoulder and added a dismayed squawk to the assessment.
We'll fight our way out.
Evalia said.
We have to.
With your arm encased in a block of ice? No, not this time.
Snoot shook his head.
We're gonna die here. So much for my contracts with NASA and SpaceX.
Santa wanted to disagree, but if they couldn't kill the T-Rex, then Snoot was right.
We do not have to die here.
They all turned toward Putin. He tossed his Kalashnikov to the side, unclipped the utility belt from his waist, and stripped off his jacket and shirt. He stood there, doughy and bare-chested, but also a strong and perfect representation of Mother Russia, just like in all those pictures of him on the internet.
What the frost are you doing?
Snoot shouted.
There aren't any cameras here. Why aren't you shooting at it?
Nicholas,
Putin said.
I made you a promise decades ago, in exchange for my life, that I would never do what I am about to do again. But I see no other choice.
Santa shook his head. He knew what was going to happen, but he couldn't stop it.
Vladimir, don't...
Niet!
Putin put his hand up.
There is no other way. This must be done. We both know that breaking my oath to you means my fate is sealed. But it appears to be sealed nonetheless. So I will do what I must do to help you save Christmas, comrade.
Santa winced. There's that word again. He hated it, because Putin used it, because of their past, because of what Putin was about to do.
What is he talking about? What does he mean his fate is sealed?
Evalia looked at Santa, her golden eyes rife with confusion and terror. Then she turned to Putin.
What are you saying, Pookie?
Santa and Snoot looked at each other and said,
Pookie?
The T-Rex roared again. Its leg had almost fully regenerated. It would come after them again soon. Putin cupped Evalia's shoulders with his hands.
I will love you forever, Kotionok. Perhaps we will meet again in eternity.
No!
She shook her head and pulled away, still guarding her frozen arm.
You don't have to do whatever it is you're going to do.
Look around, Kotionok. I have no choice. I can get you three and the Puffin out of here. Then you may yet live and find a way to defeat our adversary. What I do now, I do to save you all. But most especially you, Kotionok. You must understand, and you must be strong, like my country. It is a matter of honor. And I will do what I will do.
Tears trickled down Evalia's cheeks, but she nodded. Putin turned toward the T-Rex as its new foot slammed onto the ground. It roared again. With a final glance back at them, Putin nodded.
Go forth and save Christmas!
Though Santa had seen it hundreds of times throughout the centuries, the change never ceased to both amaze and horrify him at the same time. Putin faced the T-Rex, spread his arms wide, and transformed, inch by menacing inch. Black hair sprouted from his shoulders and swirled down his arms, accompanied by a matching swirl of red scales. His fingernails elongated into curved black talons, and two long horns spiraled out from the sides of his head. The black hair and red scales covered his back next. Then all of his muscles started widening and expanding. As Putin's body enlarged, large spikes sprouted from his elbows, forearms, shins, knees, and spine. Though Santa couldn't see Putin's face, He knew his teeth had also elongated, blackened, and sharpened, especially his canine teeth. His eyes would have turned a solid light blue color devoid of pupils. By the time it all ended, Putin stood almost as tall and as wide as the T-Rex. He let out a vicious half-bellow, half-roar, and charged forward. Vladimir Putin had assumed his ultimate form, and his identity of legend. Krampus had finally returned. Chapter 16.
What the actual frost just happened?
With his jaw all but touching his toes, Snoot stared at the thing Putin had just become. He'd only seen stuff like that in movies and comic books, but here it had just happened in front of him. It made no scientific sense to him. Then again, he was on a mission with his cousin, a dark elf with a magic crossbow whose arm had gotten frozen solid by an ice-breathing raptor inside a hidden compound on an island in the Bermuda Triangle while trying to save Christmas from Father Time, the Lord of Time and Space, with none other than Santa Claus himself. Professor Puffsworth honked from his shoulder.
Oh yeah? And I befriended a puffin that had a bomb strapped to his neck.
Maybe Putin's transformation wasn't so far-fetched after all.
It's an abomination.
Santa raised his shotgun and took aim at something behind them. Putin sprang forward and engaged the T-Rex in a violent, thundering duel of slashing, biting, and roaring.
No argument there.
Snoot gawked at the battle.
He looks like Krampus.
Santa fired, and a shredded pterodactyl pancaked the ground just in front of him.
He is Krampus.
What?
Ivalia blinked at Santa.
What are you talking about?
Come on. The other dinos are still coming. We've got to get moving.
Santa opened the shotgun's action, ejected the spent shells, and pressed 3 fresh ones into the 3 chambers. He waved for Ivalia and Snoot to follow him toward the door, and toward the live-action Putin versus T-Rex kaiju fight.
Hopefully he can create enough of a diversion that we can get past.
What is Krampus?
Ivalia asked.
What's happened to him?
The man you and the world know as Vladimir Putin is actually the mythical being known as Krampus. Once he was my friend and ally through many wars and other conflicts. But when I changed my methods from harming those who did wrong to focus on delivering gifts to those who do good, Krampus refused to make the switch. Putin slashed the left side of the T-Rex's snout and gouged its eye, but it whirled with its tail and whacked him to the side with a rib-cracking blow. The red talon marks on the T-Rex's face sealed up seconds later. But as it pursued Putin, the T-Rex stepped away from the door. It gave Snoot and the others an opening, and they hurried toward it. He continued eating children who were on my naughty list, even though I told him I couldn't allow that anymore,
Santa continued as they ran.
We fought, and he lost. Instead of killing him, I put a curse on him that transformed him into his human form indefinitely. He vowed to never transform into his monstrous Krampus form again. If he does, the curse will eventually kill him.
Huh.
Snoot raised his eyebrows as he ran.
That explains a lot about Putin.
Then I banished him to Russia. That's what he was trying to explain to you, Ivalia. I should have known better than to leave him alone. He went from eating children to finding his way into the KGB, then to Russian politics, and now he runs one of the most powerful countries in the world. But now that will all come to an end because he violated the terms of the curse.
To save us!
Ivalia shouted.
To save us,
Santa nodded.
And hopefully Christmas too.
Santa led them into the door, turned back and fired a grenade at an approaching steel-coated triceratops. The blast hit the ground at its feet and flung it into the side of the doorframe. The steel triceratops hit with a heavy metal thunk and landed in the opening, blocking most of it. That would delay some of the larger ones from getting inside, Snoot hoped. A trio of green raptors filtered through the door and over the steel triceratops. Even before Santa yelled for them to get behind him, Snoot had already taken cover. He'd seen the raptor's ice breath in action and wanted no part of it. Professor Puffsworth flew above him, squawking and hooting. Ivalia shrank further back. Santa raised his shotgun.
It's all right. Their ice can't hurt me.
As the raptors closed in, Snoot noticed tendrils of smoke trailing from their nostrils.
Santa!
Before Santa could respond, the lead raptor's mouth opened wide and a fireball the size of a human head belched forward. It hit Santa square in his left shoulder, and the shotgun discharged in the wrong direction. Snoot screamed, and the other raptors opened their mouths as well. Fireballs launched at them from 3 different directions. Snoot jumped and dodged and ducked under them as best as an unathletic Christmas elf could hope to. But he slipped, fell, and hit the rock floor hard. Pain deadened his left shoulder and elbow, and the coils of Christmas lights around his torso pricked at his skin, even though he wore a coat. A raptor darted over to him, reared its head back, and opened its mouth wide. An intense orange light glowed deep within its throat. Snoot held up his hands and wailed in terror. Then its head blew apart in an eruption of steaming red flesh and blood. Santa stood behind it with his shotgun in hand. A circular black burn mark marred the left shoulder of his red coat. Relieved, Snoot scrambled to his feet as Santa turned to face the other 2 raptors and whatever else was heading their way. Evalia hollered,
I think I found a way out!
Snoot turned and ran after her. Sure enough, a door resembling that of a bank vault or a submarine hatch beckoned them forward. Evalia pointed to a control terminal.
Can you...
Of course I can!
Snoot typed in a series of commands, but each of them yielded a negative response and a disappointing double beep.
Well, maybe I can.
Hurry!
Evalia said. Snoot exhaled a sharp sigh as he worked.
Obviously.
Professor Puffsworth landed on Snoot's shoulder and whistled. Snoot brushed him off.
You're adorable, but I need to concentrate.
Professor Puffsworth flitted up to a rock, perched just above the door, and stared down at Snoot while he worked. Santa caught up to them at the door.
Progress?
I could move faster if everyone would just shut the hell up!
Snoot tapped in a half-dozen more commands, all to no avail. Then a roar ripped through his ears, far closer than he'd wished. Heavy, lumbering footsteps shook the ground beneath his feet. He swallowed and turned back. The T-Rex loomed in the distance, only about 100 feet away from them. Claw marks and lacerations on its face, chest and sides oozed blood, but they sealed up as it approached. Santa patted at his belt, frantic.
I'm out of grenades, and the 3 rounds in my shotgun are the last I have.
Pookie died trying to give us a chance, and now we've failed him.
Evalia shook her head.
We're doomed.
Snoot's fingers trembled and he fought to control his breathing, but he was close to hacking into the system.
I just need another minute. Do what you can to hold him off.
3 shotgun blasts against a T-Rex with healing powers won't do anything,
Santa replied. The T-Rex stalked closer.
Just 1 minute and we can get out of here, all 3 of us.
Snoot glanced around and then looked up.
It should be 4 of us. Where's Professor Puffsworth?
From the moment of my hatching, I was destined for greatness. My mother knew it the instant she first laid eyes on me, there in our nest along that verdant cliff face in Iceland. When I matured enough to comprehend the meaning of her words, she told me of my potential for greatness. She told me of my potential to change everything for my fellow feathered friends and family. As I grew, I learned to fly before any of my siblings. I outpaced auks, guillemots, and other puffins in contests of speed. I demonstrated advanced fishing acumen well beyond my years, with a particular knack for catching the largest and juiciest of the herring that swam in the frigid ocean waters nearby. It seemed that my coming might have fulfilled the ancient puffin prophecy at long last. But I was wrong. We all were. When that wretched white-skinned man captured my flock and fastened those devices to our necks, I was just as powerless to save my feathery friends and family as I was to save myself. And so we succumbed to a life of slavery, of coercion, of death. A life resigned to fulfilling the merciless and menacing whims of a monster. But then, on the event of our apocalypse, as we flew toward our eternal destruction, the Short One, my elven savior, and his companions ransomed me from a meaningless fate. Though everyone I ever loved perished in the attack, I now know the truth. My destiny is not to fulfill the prophecy of old. It is to save my new friends, my new family, from certain death. And I know just how to do it, because there is only one way. I swoop down from my perch above the door toward the fat man. In the pocket of his red coat, I will find what I need. My talons cling to the blood-dyed rabbit fur just above his right side pocket, and I steady myself with a few flaps of my wings. Now secure, I dip my head inside. As the fat man fires his tri-barreled cannon, my beak finds the device that was once secured around my neck with that repugnant neon-green strap. I pull it out, release my grip on his coat, and spring away from him. I take flight, glorious flight burdened with purpose, toward the approaching mammoth reptile, high and away from the trajectory of the fat man's cannon fire. As I fly, I bob my head to shift the wretched device in my beak.
There are 2 compression fins on the sides,
the Russian man-monster had said. To use the device, I must compress them both. I shift my beak once more and clamp down on the fins in unison, and I hear the twin clicks that signal my impending demise. The moment my greatness fully manifests, and I begin my count. 1. The mammoth reptile opens its mouth in a ferocious roar that rattles my hollow avian bones. I aim for its fleshy red tongue and smack into it full force. 2. The twin stenches of rotting flesh and prehistoric breath overwhelm me, but I maintain my grip on the device. That is essential now. 3. I glance back at the one who delivered me from death, my elven savior. Were I able to smile, I would have. The mammoth reptile's jaws begin to close around me, trapping me in an ivory cage. 4. My elven savior's eyes are sad, but he will be safe, and he will always have my feathery love. Rows of sharp teeth block me from my elven savior for eternity, and the beast's tongue ushers me deeper into his mouth, toward the gaping black chasm of its throat. 5. As I draw my final breath of fetid air, a chariot wreathed in bright blue fire ferries me into the puffin afterlife.
Chapter 17. In a burst of intense blue light, the T-Rex's head exploded, along with Professor Puffsworth.
No!
The sight twisted something in Santa's gut. The puffin had sacrificed itself to save them from an impossible threat, and now prehistoric flesh and blood and chips of bones and teeth rained down on them. Santa grabbed Snoot's arm and tried to pull him away from the carnage, and away from the other dinosaurs filtering into the space from behind the T-Rex's limp body. Despite Puffsworth's noble sacrifice, this ordeal wasn't over yet. They had to get out of there, or the other dinos would corner them in no time.
"He's gone, Snoot!"
Santa yelled.
"We have to get out of here! There are more of them coming!"
Snoot just kept wailing and howling and crying. Finally, Santa shoved Snoot against the door and backhanded his face.
"Pull yourself together, man! We need you! Puffsworth and Putin died so that you would live! Now open that turkey-trotten door!"
Wide-eyed, Snoot rubbed his reddened cheek and nodded. With a sniffle, he turned and hammered a few keystrokes into the control panel. A loud clank sounded, and the heavy door popped open. The dinosaurs continued their approach. Another stegosaurus, a pair of pterodactyls, and a few others Santa couldn't identify. Santa yanked the door fully open and ushered Snoot and Evalia inside. Then he hauled it shut behind him and twisted the crank to seal it. Dinosaur bodies rammed into it from the other side in a chorus of thuds, but unless they could teleport or melt through several feet of steel, they weren't coming through. With the danger behind them, Snoot's composure broke again, and he lay face down on the floor, sobbing. Evalia leaned against the rock wall of the tunnel they'd just entered. Wincing and bracing her frozen arm against her body, tears also rolled down her chiseled cheeks. And Santa stood between them, holding Cherry in his right hand with only 2 rounds left in her barrels. Putin and Puffsworth were gone, but the 3 of them had survived. Santa grabbed Snoot by his belt and tugged him to his feet.
Come on. We have to get Evalia some help. The sunlight and the tropical heat will thaw her arm, but we still need to get her proper medical care. Christmas is all but lost for this year, but we can at least help her. The tunnel ascends as it moves along. Perhaps we can find a way out.
Snoot moaned and wiped the tears from his cheeks, but he complied. Santa reached to help Evalia, but in a display of elven toughness, she shrugged his hand away and pushed herself off the wall on her own.
Let's get out of this time-forsaken place,
she said through gritted teeth. Santa led them through the rock-lined tunnel until 15 minutes later they reached a steel ladder. He climbed it, pressed a green button embedded in the wall, and a hatch groaned open above his head. Hot sand and tropical sunlight streamed into the opening, and a blast of tropical heat hit Santa's face as he ascended through the hatch. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he set foot on the hot island turf. He shifted Cherry to his left, then reached down and hooked his right hand under Evalia's good arm to help her out of the shaft. Even with her arm turned to a solid block of ice, she still weighed next to nothing. Snoot clambered out next and frowned at the scene. With watery eyes, he remarked,
It's beautiful, but it's not the same without Professor Puffsworth.
We have no time to dawdle.
Santa motioned toward the south.
The sleigh is back this way. We have to hurry.
After 20 minutes of maneuvering over patches of sand and tall grass and through sporadic palm trees, they made it back to where Rudolph awaited them with the sleigh. As they approached, Rudolph shuffled his hooves and chuffed. His eyes widened slightly, and then he tried to recoil. But he was still harnessed to the sleigh. The reindeer's reaction confused Santa at first, but he quickly realized that Rudolph was reacting to some sort of inbound threat. Santa raised his shotgun as a white light flashed, and sure as sugar plums, Father Time snapped into view beside Rudolph. He placed his pallid hand on the reindeer's harness. Aside from his pasty white skin, beard, and hair, he looked far less out of place in his attire than he had all those hours earlier in the North Pole. Still clad in his navy blue Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts, he also wore a pair of brown sandals, and he grinned at them with the usual mischief glimmering in his maniacal eyes.
I must say, Nicholas,
Father Time began,
I'm impressed you've made it this far. Undead reindeer, polar bears, and scientists? Exploding Arctic fowl, mutilated dinosaurs. And now you're here with me. How marvelous.
Santa refused to lower Cherry, so he stared down her 3 barrels at Father Time.
Give me back the timepiece and step away from the sleigh.
Rudolph tried to pull away from Father Time, clearly uncomfortable around him, but he couldn't get free. Santa wanted to help him, but Father Time had the upper hand.
Oh, Nicholas.
Father Time shook his head and tisked. He took hold of Rudolph's harness to keep him from pulling at it.
Think of all the hurt and death you could have avoided had you just given me Mrs. Claus for one night.
I don't exist to bend to your whims, and neither does she.
Santa started forward.
By all means, come on over.
Father Time beckoned Santa forward with a scooping motion of his arms.
It'll be much easier for your hooved friend to infect ya once I bring him back into real time.
Santa stopped and shifted his attention to Rudolph. He hadn't noticed until now, but Father Time had indeed frozen Rudolph in time, just as he had the polar bears in the North Pole and the scientists in Haiti. Rage permeated every fibre of Santa's being.
What did you do to him?
You know exactly what I did to him.
Father Time grinned and patted Rudolph's back. Rudolph unfroze, and within 3 seconds, he deteriorated from young and healthy to decrepit, rabid, and bloody. An undead abomination like the other reindeer before. He raged and chomped and snarled, but he couldn't get free from the harness attaching him to the sleigh. Yet as he pulled, the harness dug into his now mangy fur and started peeling the outer layers of his hide from his flesh. The sight of it left Santa sick to his very core. Whatever minuscule chance of saving Christmas remained, it had just died along with Rudolph. Father Time stepped a few extra feet away from Rudolph and feigned concern.
Oh, dear. Ooh, how horrific.
You bastard!
Santa pulled Cherry tight into his shoulder and aimed at Father Time's head.
Harsh language, Nicholas.
Father Time waved his finger.
I wonder, does someone maintain a naughty list for folks like you and me? If so, I think you've just earned your way onto that list.
I don't give a damn what you think. You've destroyed Christmas and killed dozens of people, all because you're more selfish than Scrooge himself.
Father Time shrugged and giggled.
Like I said, you had your chance to cooperate.
Then he disappeared in a flash of light. Santa lowered Cherry and stared at Rudolph, his heart heavy and gut twisting with the grief of defeat. Without Rudolph to guide the sleigh, Christmas's fate was sealed. The Star of Wonder could get Santa airborne, but without a functional navigation system programmed into it, he wouldn't be able to control the sleigh. And even if Santa could somehow get the timepiece back, Father Time had just killed his last hope for salvaging Christmas this year. Even so, Santa couldn't justify keeping Rudolph in his current condition. He shifted his aim and did the only humane thing he could. He discharged one of his last 2 rounds at Rudolph. The blast splattered what remained of his undead head onto the sleigh, against nearby palm trees and into the sand around them. Rudolph's form slumped to the ground in a tattered mass of blood and decayed flesh, and Santa's heart sank even lower. Harsh light flashed in his periphery, and Father Time's taunting voice whispered into his ear.
Such a sullen end to the holiday season.
Santa whirled toward him. He snatched Father Time's collar in one hand, anchoring him in place, and jammed Cherry's muzzle under his chin. Father Time gave a nervous laugh.
Come now, Nicholas. You know, normal weapons can't hurt me. I mean, hell, most magic weapons can't either. I'm Father Time. I control time and space. And besides, it's over anyway. I've already won. There's nothing you can do to change that, including trying to blow off my head.
Santa hesitated. Then a white flash blinded him and his grip on Father Time's collar faltered. He blinked and rubbed his eyes until he could see through the negative splotches in his vision.
Santa!
Snoot called from behind him. Santa whirled around. 20 feet away, Father Time stood behind Evalia with one arm around her torso and a huge knife at her throat. Santa's eyes widened, and he patted at his hip. It was his Bowie knife that Father Time held.
Pity what happened to her arm, isn't it, Nicholas?
Father Time shook his head and peered down at her frozen right arm.
I wonder what would happen if I gave it a little tap.
Evalia gasped, and her golden eyes widened.
No!
Santa reached forward, but he couldn't have saved her even if he'd been 5 feet away. Father Time drove the pommel of the Bowie knife hard into Evalia's frozen shoulder. The ice cracked, and Evalia's arm snapped clean off from her shoulder. It broke into several large chunks when it hit the sandy ground, and blood oozed from what remained of her shoulder. Evalia shrieked.
You monster!
Santa roared. He couldn't allow this nightmare to continue. He bolted forward, ready to tear Father Time to shreds with his bare hands. But white light flashed again, and Father Time vanished, this time with Evalia. Santa skidded to a halt and looked around. A wide-eyed Snoot frantically pointed behind him.
Over here!
Father Time called. Santa spun around. His grip on Cherry had never been tighter. Then he watched, helpless, as Father Time drew the bowie knife across Evalia's neck in a line of dark burgundy. Father Time released her, and she slumped to her knees in the sand, clutching her bloody throat with her left hand.
No!
Santa yelled. Father Time disappeared in another flash. Then Snoot gasped from behind Santa. Santa turned back, and the nightmare was complete. Snoot clutched his stomach. The bowie knife protruded from his gut, just under the strands of Christmas lights coiled around his torso. Dark blood pulsed from between his fingers, and he blinked as he fell onto his side. Chapter 18.
Snoot!
Santa shouted. Santa had lost everyone who'd come with him, and all within a matter of minutes. He'd been powerless to stop any of it, but the worst part was knowing that Father Time could have killed any of them at any point. He'd been toying with them, teasing them, giving Santa just enough hope of finding a way to win back the timepiece, only to rip it all away from him at an even higher cost than he'd expected. Here at the end. It was sadistic. Father Time stood behind Snoot, his arms folded, wearing a wicked smile, and reveling in his victory. In a rage, Santa jerked Cherry level and fired his last round at Father Time, but another white light flashed, and the buckshot embedded in the palm trees behind him instead. Father Time reappeared in the same spot, shaking his head.
What did I tell you, Nicholas? You can't harm me with that thing.
I will find a way to kill you, so help me God.
No, you won't.
Father Time spread his arms wide.
Look around you. All your friends are dead. You've lost. It's over. All of it. And by my universally precise calculations, your deliveries to Samoa should have started 5 minutes and 21 seconds ago. You've failed. Utterly and completely. Just give up.
Santa gritted his teeth.
Never.
Father Time rolled his eyes and sauntered over to the sleigh, leaving Snoot alone. Santa tossed Cherry aside and rushed to Snoot. Perhaps there was still a chance to save him. When Santa reached him, Snoot already had his flask out and quickly downed the last gulp of Putin's vodka inside. Santa cradled Snoot's head and leaned over him.
I'm sorry, Snoot. I never wanted this to happen.
Snoot's eyes had started to glaze over. He coughed and dropped the flask into the sand.
Me too, boss.
He coughed again, and more blood oozed from his gut. Despite what Santa had hoped, it was absolutely a mortal wound. Yet again, he could do nothing to save his friend.
But I know something that cold-brained idiot doesn't.
Snoot reached up and pulled Santa close. Through reddened lips, he wheezed,
I know how you can kill this frosted bastard.
What? Santa whispered. He glanced back to see Father Time plop down into the sleigh. He picked up the reins and flopped them around as if trying it out. Rudolph's fetid gore still tainted the side of the sleigh, and Evalia still lay lifeless in the sand just a few feet away. Santa refocused on Snoot.
How?
Snoot smiled, raised his bloody hand and patted the Christmas lights strung across his body.
A little holiday cheer. These lights aren't just Christmas lights. It's a bullwhip.
Santa tilted his head. What good was that supposed to be? What? Snoot managed a blood-tinged smile.
I knew you'd be impressed. I finished the prototype right before we found the dinosaurs. Now help get it off me.
Santa worked the coils of lights off Snoot's torso and over his head, careful not to contort him too much.
Why would this work? He's Father Time. Nothing can harm him.
When you crack a bullwhip, you break the...
Snoot winced and clutched at his gut. Santa tried to give him aid, but Snoot pushed his hands away.
Don't waste your time. Just listen. Bullwhips can break the sound barrier. Since there are lights on the whip, you'll be breaking the sound barrier while the light is moving at the speed of light because it's light and that's what it does. That combination should be enough to rend the space-time continuum and harm him, maybe even kill him.
Santa looked at the Christmas lights in his hands. Then he squinted at Snoot.
I don't think the science behind this is accurate.
Then it's fucking magic, damn it! Frost me! Look, it's your only chance against him. Either it works or it doesn't. If it does, it'll be a big damn Christmas miracle. Press the button on the base of the grip to turn them on.
Santa rotated the grip in his hand and saw the button. Snoot grabbed Santa's lapels with both hands and pulled him even closer.
Now go whip his pasty white ass.
With that, Snoot exhaled a final vodka-scented breath, closed his eyes, and died. Santa muttered curses, stood to his feet, and faced Father Time, holding the whip of lights in his hands.
So sad, Nicholas,
Father Time said from within the sleigh.
You could have prevented all this. Now these tragedies are yours to bear forever. Just like all the other lives you're responsible for destroying over the years.
Father Time sighed and scratched his neck as he stood up and stepped out of the sleigh.
What a shame.
You're a selfish, manipulative, evil bastard.
Ooh, call me all the names you desire, Nicholas. Say whatever you want.
Father Time sauntered closer to Santa, now well within range of the whip.
You failed, and you can only blame yourself.
No, I blame you.
Santa uncoiled the lights, let one end fall to the ground, and held the grip in his hand. He clicked the button on the bottom of the grip. The Christmas lights blazed to life, and crackling arcs of golden electricity snaked from above the grip down to the tip of the whip.
And now, I'm going to make you pay for it.
Father Time rolled his eyes.
No, you won't.
The strand certainly looked impressive, but Santa wondered if Snoot was right about its potential to hurt Father Time. If not, this fight would end quickly, and not in Santa's favor.
Only one way to find out.
Santa lashed the light whip at Father Time's face. The whip cracked like a thunderclap across the entire island, and Father Time's head jerked back and to the left. His hands slowly rose to his face. Father Time kept his head angled away from Santa at first, but he gradually turned, moved his hands from his face, and stared at them. A deep red gash streaked from under his left eye, across his cheek and down to his jaw.
Well, jingle my bells.
Santa had wounded. Somehow, Snoot had done it. He'd created a weapon capable of harming and possibly even killing Father Time. He'd leveled the playing field. Father Time alternated between gawking at Santa and staring at the blood on his hand. He made a sound reminiscent of a bird honking. Then he glowered at Santa.
You fat, red dick! Look what you've done! My face! It hurts!
Get used to it.
Santa cracked his neck.
I've got a whole holiday helping of hurt right here for you.
Father Time's eyes narrowed, and for once his face took on a somber expression.
There's a wide gorge between cutting my face and killing me, Nicholas.
An old saying from the 80s applies here, Time. If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Santa smirked at him.
And you're bleeding.
Father Time snarled at him.
We'll see about that.
White light streamed from Father Time's chest and devoured him, saving his limbs for last. He disappeared, but it happened a bit slower than the last several times he'd done it. Nevertheless, Santa bent his knees and drew the whip behind him, ready for Father Time to reappear. Something snapped behind him. Santa whirled around to find a huge palm tree dropping toward him. He dove aside, and it pounded the grassy sand where he'd just been standing. Santa rolled up to his knees, and his legs pistoned him forward toward his enemy. Again, white light blazed from Father Time's chest. Santa lashed the whip at the light, but the string of lights hit nothing. Father Time had vanished again. Santa waited, but this time he stepped clear of any palm trees that could possibly fall on him. A grunt sounded to Santa's left. Santa pivoted in time to see a coal-black Model T Ford careening toward him through the air. He reacted and lashed his whip at it, and the strand of lights carved through the old automobile with ease. The Model T landed in two halves, one to Santa's left and one to his right, missing him only by inches on either side. Father Time glared at him from just beyond where the Model T had emerged. White light shone from his chest, signaling his impending disappearance. But this time, Santa aimed for his head and whipped the lights at him. The whip's backlash suggested he'd made contact this time, but Santa couldn't be sure. Father Time disappeared nonetheless. Then, he snapped back into view near a palm tree about 20 feet from where he'd thrown the car at Santa, cupping his right eye. Blood oozed between Father Time's fingers, and he screamed.
You hit my eye! My eye, you jolly jerk-off!
There's plenty more where that came from.
Santa whipped at Father Time again, but rather than disappearing, Father Time stepped behind the palm tree to avoid the strike. The whip sliced clean through it, and it toppled toward Santa.
Not again!
Santa jerked the whip back and snapped it at the falling palm tree. The whip knifed straight through the palm tree, and it split into two pieces that landed atop the remnants of the Model T parts with a pair of angry crunches, and a dozen coconuts thudded into the sand all around Santa. The telltale white light shone beyond the palm tree, and Father Time burst out of sight before Santa could land another swing. Still, he'd made significant progress. He'd nailed Father Time's eye, and hopefully further hindered his teleportation abilities. Snoot had not only been right about the whip harming Father Time, but also how it could disrupt his control over time and space. A festive jingle sounded behind Santa, but not a Christmassy one. Sensing danger, he whirled around, swinging the whip in a vicious downward arc, and it severed the new object flying at him through the air. A trolley, circa 1960s San Francisco. Because of the trolley's thickness, the whip only made it partway through, but the trolley still broke in half and slammed into the tropical earth instead of hitting Santa, who dove clear just in case. Beyond the wreckage stood Father Time. He began to evaporate into light again, but Santa had anticipated that. Coupled with Father Time's slower teleportation, Santa found his opening. His whip caught Father Time by his left ankle and curled around it. Instead of fully disappearing, Father Time's head, torso, arms, and legs vanished, but his left foot remained. Then his entire body snapped back into place exactly where it had just been. He screamed and swore, but he wasn't going anywhere. Santa yanked on the whip, and it tripped Father Time. He'd hoped it would separate Father Time's foot from his leg, but it didn't. Either he hadn't pulled hard enough, or Father Time was too powerful to allow such a thing to happen. As Father Time hit the sand, Santa rushed forward, ready to end it. But when Father Time produced a hefty knife, Santa's Bowie knife, Santa slowed and skidded in the sand. Santa tried to recoil, but Father Time slashed it across his gut, and a line of fresh pain burned Santa's skin. He recoiled and hopped aside, careful not to let go of the whip. When had Father Time gotten the knife? Santa glanced back at Snoot's body. Sure enough, the Bowie knife no longer protruded from his elf-sized belly. Father Time must have grabbed it during one of his teleportation trips. Santa looked down at his stomach. His reinforced coat had absorbed most of the slash, and he said a silent thank you to Shelley for her work on it. Even so, Father Time had managed to cut Santa. Father Time bent down and unwound the whip from his ankle with the knife. A crisp, dark red burn coiled around his ankle where the whip had been, and blood oozed down both sides of his face. When he smiled, he looked more menacing than ever before.
I've got a few of my own tricks, Nicholas.
White light flashed and he popped out of sight. Santa pulled back on the whip to ready it. Light flickered in his periphery, but as he turned, sharp pain plunged into his left arm. He hollered and swung the whip, but the light flashed again, and Santa hit nothing. He looked down. A deep hole in his bicep, roughly the size of his Bowie knife's business end, pulsed with blood. Another flash. Searing pain drew a line in the back of his right thigh, and Santa dropped to his left knee to compensate. He could still walk, possibly even run if he had to. But he couldn't keep taking hits like this. Worse yet, to tend to his wounds, he'd have to let go of the whip, and that was the one thing Santa couldn't afford to do. Pain split his right cheek open just a few centimeters below his eye. Fire tore into his right shoulder. Father Time appeared in front of him and jammed the knife down at Santa's face. Santa raised his left arm hard and fast and halted Father Time's stab, but the force of the blow sent a surge of fresh pain into his bicep. His block faltered, and the knife nicked his collarbone. Father Time raised his sandaled foot and kicked Santa square in the chest. The blow launched Santa backward, and he landed on his back near a large brown boulder protruding from the sand. Father Time reappeared above him, knife in hand, and aimed down at Santa's face again. Santa's forearms caught Father Time's and redirected his attack into the sand. The Bowie knife dug deep into the earth, and Santa rolled hard toward it. Father Time yelped as Santa's girth wrenched the knife from his grip. He vanished in another flash and reappeared about 20 feet away. Santa grabbed the Bowie knife and hurled it toward Father Time. It would have hit him square between the eyes, though it may not have done any damage, but Father Time disappeared again. The Bowie knife careened into the distance and disappeared amid the exotic landscape. Tropical silence lingered for a moment. Santa inhaled a labored breath. Then a loud metallic slam shook the ground behind Santa. He turned, ready for whatever Father Time would throw at him next. Turns out Santa wasn't ready after all. 150 yards away, amid the tropical splendor of palm trees, white sand, brilliant blue skies, sunshine and crystalline waters, sat a grey World War II-era tank adorned with Germany's Iron Cross. A Panzer IV. It treaded toward him, each inch punctuated by rhythmic clanking.
Son of a...
Its main gun lowered toward Santa, and he hit the deck as it fired in a deafening boom. The sharp hum of a projectile zipped over his head, and an explosion followed. A blast of heat far hotter than the Caribbean sun could muster sizzled behind him, and fragments of wood and metal embedded in the sand near his head. Wood and metal? What had Father Time hit? Santa looked back over his shoulder. In place of his sleigh, a blackened crater dug a poetic 6 feet into the sand. Rudolph's body was gone, and all that remained of the sleigh and the Star of Wonder lay in a few smouldering chunks around Santa's body.
Curdled Christmas cookies!
This was for real. Santa was up against a damned tank! Santa knew enough about World War II-era tanks to know that they ran thanks to crews, not as one-man operations. Reloading was a process, as was adjusting the aim, and then Father Time could fire the next round. But he had to do all of that himself. Santa had a brief window of opportunity, and he'd need to use it to move forward if he intended to survive this. He scrambled to his feet and ran toward the tank, weaving between palm trees for cover. His wounded leg burned, but he didn't let it slow him down. Not that he could move particularly fast in the first place. Ahead of him, the Panzer's gun barrel lowered, swiveled to Santa's left, then it corrected. Santa smacked the bottom of the whip's handle and disengaged the lights, effectively making it a normal whip. He swung it at a palm tree that curved at almost a 90-degree angle overhead. The whip caught, and he yanked on it hard. The Panzer gun boomed again, and fire and smoke billowed out of its barrel. The palm tree pulled back against Santa's weight, hauling him upward fast, and he swung forward. The tank round whizzed below and collided with something behind him in an explosion that rattled Santa's teeth.
Eat your heart out, Indiana Jones.
Santa landed on his feet and shook the whip loose from its grip on the tree. He clicked the bottom of the handle again, and the whip ignited with the same golden arcs of electricity and the soft glow of Christmas lights that it had before. He charged forward again, but veered left, still weaving between the palm trees so as not to present an easy target. With only 20 yards of distance between them, the Panzer lined up its next shot and fired again. Father Time's aim was off, but the round still hit closer than Santa had expected just behind him. He regretted not taking more evasive action, especially when the blast launched him through the air toward the Panzer. Santa hit the sand hard and skidded to a stop about 10 feet from the Panzer's grinding treads. His vision wobbled like someone had tipped a snow globe upside down and then hurled it into a brick wall. Yet through Santa's malaise, danger registered in his veins. He needed to move, but his cognition lagged behind. A loud and rhythmic clank, clank, clank drew nearer and nearer, amplifying the pounding in Santa's head. But through it all, he heard laughter. Familiar, maniacal laughter. He knew that voice. He knew those taunts. Father Time. Whether real or imagined, the laughter spurred Santa to action. He looked up at the dark grey blur that filled his vision and pushed himself out of its path. The clank, clank, clank tore past him, and the squeaking of brakes and the grinding of gears scraped at his eardrums. Sand splashed his face, and Santa sputtered and stumbled away. His shoulder found something hard, and the rough bark of a palm tree scratched his left palm. His vision reset, but his head continued throbbing from the top of his cranium to the ends of his teeth. About 20 feet away, the Panzer rounded a palm tree and pointed at Santa again. The crackling and sizzling of the whip in his hands registered amid the clanking of the tank treads. His eyes narrowed, and he pushed himself off the tree. The image of the approaching Panzer wobbled in his vision, but he clenched the whip tighter and staggered toward it. As the tank rumbled forward, Santa sidestepped it and lashed the whip. It carved a deep gash into the Panzer's hull, but it didn't quite penetrate. It just left a glowing red laceration that quickly cooled to match the dark grey steel of the Panzer's outer shell.
It'll take half an eternity to cut through that armor.
Santa readjusted his footing and positioning as the tank swerved wide and looped back to face him again. Snoot had done well with the whip, but he hadn't anticipated a tank.
Nor should he have. This is madness.
Instead of barreling toward Santa again, the Panzer stopped, and its gun maneuvered toward him.
Not again!
With his cognition back, Santa ran as fast as his legs would carry him and as his girth would allow. But this time he headed straight for the Panzer. Its gun barrel pointed right at him. At 5 feet away, Santa cut hard to the right and swung. The whip sliced into the underside of the gun barrel about halfway through, and it bent down against the damage like a fold in a paper towel tube. Then Santa dove to the right of the Panzer, flattened his body on the ground, and covered his head. The gun fired, and a deafening boom shook everything in the vicinity, including the tank itself. Shrapnel dug into the sand near Santa's body, barely missing him. When the explosion faded to nothing, Santa looked up at his handiwork. Sure enough, the gun barrel, now blackened and less than half its original length, had banana peeled outward, Wile E. Coyote style. Smoke billowed from the end of the barrel and the Panzer shuddered. As Santa stood, the tank hatch opened and a fresh plume of smoke erupted from it. Coughing and hacking, Father Time rose from the hatch like a pale demon ascending from the fires of hell. But a demon clad in a Hawaiian shirt. His rageful eyes locked on Santa, and he pulled something from his belt. Santa pulled the whip back for a strike, but a sturdy blow accompanied by a loud crack knocked him off his feet before he could swing. Pain pounded the center of his chest, and he landed on his back. He clutched his chest with his left hand and clenched his teeth. Through the tears in his eyes, Santa saw Father Time step out of the smoke and down from the Panzer. He now held a Luger P8 pointed right at Santa. Santa looked down at his right hand. It no longer held the whip. Instead, the whip's handle lay 3 inches from Santa's open palm, and the whip's electric currents seared the sand black beneath it. He reached for it. A tiny geyser of sand erupted at Santa's fingertips, and he retracted his hand sharply. Santa looked toward Father Time. The Luger's barrel oozed smoke, which quickly dissipated in the tropical wind.
No.
Father Time limped forward, thanks to the burn on his ankle. He wore a wild, toothy smile, reminiscent of a murderous clown from a horror movie. He looked like one, too.
You've had more than your share of fun, you plump Christmas goose. But now, we're done playing around.
Santa stole a glance at his left hand, which still covered his chest. No blood tainted his fingers thanks to Shelley's modifications to his jacket, but his chest still hurt like a giant had punched his sternum. Fresh pain ignited in Santa's left shoulder, and he hollered. He clenched his eyes shut and bared his teeth again.
You may think me a clown or a jester,
Father Time said.
There's no doubt I like to have a good time, but don't mistake me for one of those idiots at the end of the movie who monologues about how awesome they are, only to fall to some trick from the leading man's utility belt or watch or whatever else he might pull out of his well-toned ass.
Santa moaned and rolled toward the whip, but another crack and another geyser returned him to his back.
Nope, you won't get anywhere near that thing. And don't worry about me running out of ammunition either. This thing still has 4 more rounds in it. More than enough to send you to the afterlife with an extra hole in your head.
Santa clenched his teeth tight. Father Time was right. There really wasn't much of anything he could do about his predicament.
Sure, you managed to cut me up a bit and hurt my eye, but that's nothing a little time won't fix. Time, which is something that I happen to have a lot of, by the way, and even if you somehow manage to inflict permanent damage, well, I hear ladies love scars.
Santa rolled to his left, away from his whip. It renewed the pain in his left shoulder, but perhaps he could find a rock or something to fling at Father Time. It wasn't much of an idea, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. He made a show of slowly and weakly crawling away from Father Time to conceal his true intentions. Then again, the aftermath of all that fighting had left him slow and weak, so perhaps it wasn't as much of an act as he'd intended it to be.
At least one lady will appreciate my scars, and all I've done to win her over.
Father Time's voice dripped with lust.
Mrs. Claus will make a fine companion, perhaps even someone I could spend eternity with. And with you out of the way, I can, well, and I will, take her as my own.
Something cool and solid and metallic touched Santa's fingertips just under the sand. He tightened his grip around it, but fire burned his fingers and he let go. Something sharp.
The time has come, Nicholas. Fall on your knees and hear the angel voices and all that. Do you have any final remarks?
Santa's fingers, now bloody, found the object again, and familiarity flooded his mind. It was his bowie knife. He couldn't see it, but it had to be. He'd thrown it roughly in this direction, and he'd gotten lucky in finding it. Whether it was his bowie knife or not, it was all he had at this point. He'd practiced his knife-throwing skills for centuries, one of the benefits of being immortal unless killed, and almost nailed Father Time between the eyes the first time. Though pain racked his body, with more concentration he knew he could land this throw just the same. He adjusted his hold on the bowie knife, positioned his hand beneath the sand where Father Time couldn't see it, and glanced back.
My wife will never go with you. But I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas just the same.
Father Time's eyes narrowed, and he pointed the Luger at Santa's face.
And I'd wish you a Happy New Year, but you won't live to see it.
Santa twisted sharply and pulled the knife from the sand. Another gunshot. The bullet screamed past Santa's face by less than an inch. Santa visualized his throw, lined it up, and centered his focus on the end of the gun barrel. He flung the Bowie knife at Father Time's Luger, which spat out the spent cartridge. Father Time's aim reset, and he pulled the trigger again. Chapter 19. The Bowie knife speared the Luger's barrel with a loud metal clang. The Luger fired again, way off target, and spewed another spent cartridge into the air. Despite his pain, Santa rolled right and grabbed the whip. He snatched it from the sand and swirled it in an arc over his head to get momentum. Father Time's Luger swung back towards Santa. Still on the ground, Santa lashed the whip. It zipped toward Father Time's face. Father Time's eyes widened, and instead of pulling the trigger, he shifted his stance and raised his left arm to shield himself. Instead of hitting his face, the whip curled around Father Time's wrist, and he wailed as it sizzled and blackened his skin. With all the strength Santa could muster, he yanked the whip back and it ripped Father Time's hand from his wrist. His hand popped 4 feet straight up into the tropical air, lingered there for a moment, then dropped to the ground and stained the sand red. Mouth agape, Father Time stared at his wrist, half cauterized but still oozing blood from the stump, and he shrieked. His eyes wide with rage, he pointed the Luger at Santa again. Another whiplash snapped the Luger from Father Time's grip and carved a deep gash into the back of his right hand. As Father Time bellowed, Santa swung again. The whip curled around Father Time's exposed neck and began searing his skin. Santa rushed forward and kicked Father Time's chest, knocking him onto his back. Santa had done it. He'd won. Father Time couldn't escape now. With his jagged teeth bared, Father Time glowered up at Santa.
Release me!
Santa shook his head.
Not a chance.
Father Time grabbed at the whip, but he pulled his hand back immediately. Fresh burns tainted his white palm and fingers.
We can make a deal. I'll give you back the timepiece.
He pulled the golden device from the pocket of his shorts and held it up toward Santa. It glimmered in the Caribbean sunlight.
It's too late for that. I've already missed my first deliveries in Samoa. Christmas is already ruined.
I'm the Lord of time and space. I can send you back in time. We can fix this.
The proposition tempted Santa for the briefest moment. But in the end, he shook his head. Even if Father Time could somehow reverse everything that had happened, there was no way Santa could ever trust him again.
Not worth it. Not when I've got you right where I want you. Not after everything you've done.
Santa began listing Father Time's offenses.
My reindeer, Evalia, Snoot, Krampus. You killed them all. And you threatened my wife. If I let you go, who's to say you won't do it again?
I won't, I promise.
Father Time extended his little finger.
Pinky swear?
Santa planted his boot on Father Time's chest, pushed him flat onto the ground, and pulled the whip tighter. Father Time choked out,
Okay, there's something else.
Santa let the whip slacken a bit.
What?
I can fix your marriage.
The breath pushed out of Santa's lungs as if Father Time had punched his gut, and all of his physical aches and wounds pulsed with fresh pain.
What did you just say?
You heard me.
A mischievous grin curled Father Time's lips.
I can fix your marriage.
Santa hesitated. Was this some sort of ploy? Or was it a final cheap shot from an already defeated Father Time?
Why do you think my marriage needs fixing?
Oh, please, Nicholas. It's obvious. I can tell by watching you interact with her. She's cold toward you. And you're apathetic. That's no way to live.
Father Time raised his good arm and dangled the timepiece in front of Santa again.
I can take you back in time to the moment where it all went wrong, and you can make sure it never happened.
Santa scowled at him, and he denied the truth of Father Time's words.
Marriages take years to go wrong.
Father Time cackled and coughed, and shook his head. The black and red burn marks on his neck from the whip contrasted with the ghostly paleness of his white skin.
Not in your case. It's just a matter of changing one moment in time, shifting one wrong decision to a positive one.
Father Time winked at him.
Removing one errant Victoria's Secret catalog that never should have made its way into your hands in the first place.
Santa's eyes narrowed, and his eyebrows arched down. He tightened his grip on the whip.
Fix that one moment, and your marriage is restored.
Father Time's grin widened into a smile.
But you'll have to free me, of course, in order to do it.
Father Time waved his right hand with the timepiece still in it, and the air distorted and changed from the exotic colors all around them. A circular door-sized rift in the fabric of space and time opened, and the wispy colors solidified into the rich, dark wood of Santa's bedroom back in the North Pole. There, Santa saw himself seated on his bed, alone, with the Victoria's Secret catalogue on his lap. It looked brand new. He remembered that moment. Within a minute or so, Shelley would enter the bedroom and catch him in the act of stashing the catalogue under the bed. And so would begin decades of strife and strain on their marriage, all because of one moment of foolishness on his part. All because of one stupid mistake. Father Time smiled again.
I've created a portal to the past. All you have to do is go through it, and you can simply erase that part of history. You can prevent the damage you've done before it ever happens. Every person who ever lived wants an opportunity to change something in their past. But now you can actually, literally do it.
Santa hesitated again. To be able to erase that mistake would be invaluable to him. He absently leaned toward the portal.
But wait, there's more.
Father Time interjected.
This is your one shot. You'll go through here, you'll have 1 minute to make your changes, and then you'll come back to the Bermuda Triangle with me. That's the deal. If you stay longer than a minute, you're stuck in the 90s again, and literally no one wants that kind of prison sentence. The old you would cease to exist, and your current consciousness will inhabit your svelte 90s body again. The only differences will be what you bring with you and what you're wearing.
Unless I come back through the portal,
Santa clarified.
Back here, to this island, to this time?
Yes. And I have to go with you. If you don't take me with, you'll be stuck in that time, regardless of the 1 minute limitation.
Father Time's neck strained against the whip.
So hurry up and release me. This thing is burning the hell out of my neck.
Santa gazed into the portal again. If he freed Father Time, he could indeed change the course of his marriage. But at what cost to the universe? Father Time had already killed so many, and he'd done it on little more than a whim. What would keep him from doing something even worse in the future? But Santa could restore his marriage if he went through. He could reconstruct his ruined heart, and Shelley's too. He could prevent the trouble from ever happening to begin with. If he could do that, then perhaps he could make Father Time send him back to salvage Christmas for this year as well. Then again, would he really be restoring anything? Snoot, Evalia, and Krampus would still be dead, along with Rudolph and all of the other reindeer. Father Time wanted Santa to come back to this timeline with him once he fixed the catalogue issue. And did choosing to rewrite the history of his marriage actually solve the root problem? Or would Shelley just catch him with the same catalogue or something else later on anyway?
I refuse to apologize for something I'm not sorry for,
he'd said to her earlier that day. But he was Sorry. Not just sorry he'd been caught, but sorry that he'd violated her trust and the sanctity of their marriage. If he went back and erased that part of his history, he'd never have to give her a real apology. And then, he'd never have to change. But he needed to change. Father Time's offer sounded good on the surface, but Santa knew it wasn't right. Shelley deserved better, and he needed to give her a better version of himself. This was not the way to do it. If he chose the easy fix, he'd be just as treacherous as Father Time. Santa set his gaze on Father Time.
No.
Father Time blinked, and his eyebrows arched down in confusion.
No what?
Santa pressed his boot hard under Father Time's chest and pulled the whip tight again.
I'm not falling for it. I won't pretend to restore my marriage by stopping our troubles from happening instead of finding a way to work through them. That's not how marriage works.
Father Time's mouth hung open.
Nicholas, think about what you're...
No.
Santa added even more pressure to his boot, and Father Time gasped.
You're a menace, and you've got to be dealt with, just like I need to deal with my marriage the right way, like a man, not like a coward.
Father Time enclosed the timepiece in his hand and pointed his charred index finger at Santa.
Kill me, and the world will suffer. The whole universe will. With no one to manage time and space, the natural order will spiral out of control. Mark my words, Nicholas. Killing me means the end of everyone's existence.
Santa shook his head.
You told me back in the North Pole that you have everything automated. That's why you're free to bounce in and out of time as you please.
Father Time blinked at him.
You're a fool if you think that's good enough. A wind-up watch still needs routine maintenance. A car still needs occasional repairs. Sometimes you have to slap a fresh coat of paint on an old house. And time's the same. Kill me, and those fixes won't happen.
We've gotten along just fine for the last 4,000 years, was it? You said you've had things running on their own for at least that long.
No, that's not... You can't!
Father Time shook his fist at Santa, his voice heightening with intensity.
So help me, Nicholas. I'll still ruin you, even if it's in the afterlife. I'll find a way to ruin you and everyone you've ever loved. I'll destroy Christmas forever!
In the immortal words of Kelly Clarkson,
Santa anchored his boot against Father Time's chest.
Christmas isn't cancelled. Just you.
Santa wrenched the whip back with all his strength. It flared hot with golden electricity and sheared clean through Father Time's neck. Father Time's eyes bugged out as the whip severed his head from his body. It plopped onto the ground, blood pulsing from his pale neck into the sand, and his limp right hand released the timepiece. It tumbled into the grass nearby. Santa clicked the whip off, and it reverted to a normal strand of Christmas lights again. He spat on Father Time's Hawaiian shirt and said,
Mele Kaliki Maka, jackass.
Bolts of white lightning erupted from Father Time's neck and body. They arced into the sand, licked the palm trees, and tore into the sky. Santa staggered back and over to the far side of the panzer to take cover behind it. But he kept watching from cover. Father Time's body lifted from the ground and began to rotate around, still spewing lightning. At first, Santa thought he'd killed an immortal from Highlander. But then fissures of white light cracked Father Time's body into hundreds of segments and he exploded. Santa ducked, and despite the tank's size, he could feel chunks of Father Time's remains impacting the other side. It all ended as quickly as it began, and Santa emerged from his cover to steal a look. Before him loomed dozens of portals to other times and locations, rifts in time and space, perhaps even doors to other dimensions. In one, a pair of armored knights jousted before a medieval fair audience. It looked authentic, but it could have been a dinner show at medieval times, for all Santa knew. In another, a handsome young gunman wearing a black hat shot another man dead in a dusty southwestern street. It looked about right for the mid-1800s. Another showed the interior of a plane cockpit with Amelia Earhart inside. Another showed a view of a concert from backstage. It looked like a Led Zeppelin show from behind, but Santa heard no sound coming from it. 2 others showed scenic fantasy worlds. One showed a quartet of heroes, a fiery lance-wielding man riding a blue-green wyvern, a powerful mage manipulating the natural world around him with his magic, a shadowy assassin carrying 2 brutal knives, and a hulking green troll-like fellow battling a dragon that appeared to be born of ice. The second of the 2 portals displayed a ragtag group of travellers. 3 of them were little more than teenagers, 2 young men and a blonde girl who reminded Santa of Shelley in her appearance. And the other 2 were a talking wolf and a 7-foot lizard person wearing bright blue armour. Another portal led to a dark, cavernous place. Perhaps some sort of energy mine, where men and women with high-tech weapons battled armies of mutated human-like creatures, androids, and even a glowing green spirit of sorts. The scene was equal parts haunting and horrifying, and Santa had no desire to look any closer. But 2 others especially caught his attention. One showed Santa's bedroom again, the same scene Father Time had offered to send him so he could fix his marriage. He could go back of his own volition if he wanted, and he could tell Shelley the truth about the catalogue and apologize immediately. That would resolve their issues in a positive way. The other portal showed Santa at home, in bed in the dark. He recognized it as earlier that morning, minutes before Crandall's cries had awakened him. If he could go back to that time, he'd still be able to make his deliveries for Christmas. But according to what Father Time had said, Santa could only enter one of them. The obvious choice was to go back and save his marriage, but in doing so, he'd set his life back a few decades. He'd also be leaving Snoot, Evalia, and Krampus to their fates. Sure, they'd still exist in the alternate timeline, but they wouldn't be the same friends he'd grown to love over the last day. Their horrific deaths would continue to haunt him as well, as his memories would not leave him alone. In the end, his decision came down to what Father Time had told him.
If you stay longer than a minute, you're stuck in the 90s again, and literally no one wants that kind of prison sentence.
That left him with only one choice, and he knew it was the better of the 2. It was the choice that would not only save Christmas and his friends, but would also give him a chance to save his marriage, the right way. Santa retrieved his bowie knife and sheathed it, coiled the Christmas light whip and hooked it to his belt and grabbed Cherry. Then he secured his hat on his head, plunked the timepiece into his coat pocket, and stepped into the portal leading to earlier that morning. Chapter 20. Date: Christmas Eve. Time: 3:24 p.m. Samoan time. Location: North Pole. Santa's eyes opened in the darkness. He lay in his bed, wide awake. Adrenaline pulsed throughout his body, and he jerked upright, blinking.
Why am I so on edge?
His girth spilled out of the bed, and his heavy boot-clad feet hit the floor.
Boots? Why did I wear these to bed?
Santa clapped his hands twice, and the LED lights on the ceiling gleamed to life. He looked down at himself and gasped. He was covered in blood. Well, sort of. His heavy rabbit fur coat was now blood red with white trim, whereas it had been only white before. Stranger still, a burn mark the size of a human head blackened his left shoulder. He found a large cut across the middle of his coat, as if someone had slashed a blade across it. He also fingered several smaller holes, all of them clean cuts, or what looked to be bullet holes, in his shoulders and arms. The ongoing discoveries startled him. None of this made any sense.
When did all of this happen?
He stood upright and took 3 steps toward the door when he felt the weight of something hanging from his belt. He looked down. A coil of Christmas lights hung from his hip like a whip.
What in the world?
He patted his outer coat pocket, searching for anything else out of the ordinary. Santa dug his hand into the pocket and pulled the object out. The overhead lights glinted off its round, golden surface. At first, he thought it was a pocket watch, but then he noticed the engraved image of the North Star on the cover. The timepiece. Upon seeing it, the entirety of the timeline he'd just left behind snapped back into his memory. The zombie reindeer, polar bears and humans, The Star of Wonder, Rudolph and Snoot, Evalia, Puffsworth and Putin. Next came the memory of their deaths, all because of Father Time's meddling. A deep sense of loss hit Santa's gut and threatened to make him vomit, followed by the pain of every stab, bullet and blow he'd sustained. It all racked his body simultaneously. Then it all faded to nothing.
Good Garland!
He shouted as the sensations ended and as his memories fully restored.
Nick, what are you doing?
A familiar feminine voice grumbled from behind him. Santa whirled around. Shelley lay on her side of the bed, clad in the same evergreen nightgown she'd worn earlier that morning, in the old timeline. She squinted at him and glanced at the clock.
It's 3:30 in the morning. Why are the lights on? And are you dressed?
How could Santa even begin to explain to her everything that had happened in the previous timeline? It was folly to even try.
What happened to your coat? Why is it all red? And did you wear your boots to bed? And your knife? Why?
Santa patted his hip and found his bowie knife in its sheath next to the whip of Christmas lights. It had indeed returned with him from the Caribbean.
There's sand in the bed?
Shelley sat up and retracted her feet so her knees reached her chest. She pushed back the covers, revealing a trio of long silver tubes.
Nick, why is your shotgun in the bed?
It's not loaded.
Santa blinked at his own words. What a weird way to justify that. Shelley just stared at him like she had so many times over the last few decades. He would have to explain everything to her eventually, but now wasn't the time. She was too groggy to hear him out, and he still had to make sure going back in time had actually corrected everything. He settled on saying,
Sorry, it's a long story.
Santa tucked the timepiece back in his coat pocket, grabbed the shotgun from next to Shelley, and leaned it against the wall. He noticed it still had the grenade launcher attachment that Putin's men had added to it back in Russia. Then he climbed into the bed, boots and all, and took Shelley by her shoulders. His heart rate tripled. Before he checked everything else, he had something even more important to resolve.
Shelley,
he said, his heart thundering.
I have something I need to say to you.
She groaned.
Oh, can it wait? I'm supposed to be sleeping, but now I have to change the linens because you went to bed wearing your boots, and now somehow there's sand in the bed.
She glared at him with sleepy eyes.
And where did you even manage to find sand? We live in the North Pole, for frost's sake.
Please, Shelley, we need to talk.
The anger and annoyance in her vivid blue eyes waned, but only slightly.
What is it?
Santa swallowed the lump in his throat.
I'm sorry.
She squinted at him again.
For what?
For an instant, Santa thought he might have stepped into the wrong portal. Was he back in the 90s? He glanced around the room to check, but since his room hadn't changed much, ever, much less over the last few decades, it gave him no clues. Except the LED lights overhead. Those didn't exist in the 90s. He was indeed back to earlier that same day. And then Santa saw realization dawn on Shelley, the same as when he'd discovered the timepiece in his pocket. That realization, coupled with guarded hopefulness as she kept staring at him. In response to her question, Santa wanted to say,
You know what I'm sorry for.
But he didn't. It would make for a coward's apology. He'd just severed the head of the Lord of Time and Space like a man. Now he needed to name his transgression like a man as well.
I'm sorry for that business with the Victoria's secret catalogue. I betrayed your trust and damaged our marriage. And I was fundamentally and thoroughly wrong.
He swallowed again. His mouth had gone as dry as the sand he'd brought back with him from the Bermuda Triangle. He repeated,
I'm sorry.
Shelley just continued to stare at him. So beautiful. But for all Santa knew, behind those remarkable blue eyes, she could be plotting where to hide his body.
Furthermore, I'm sorry my unwillingness to apologize drove a wedge between us for the past few decades. I let my stubbornness guide me, and it cost us, what could have been some of the best years of our lives. I'm very sorry for that, and I hope you can find it within your heart to forgive me.
Shelley sat there for a long time, just looking at him, searching his eyes. Did she believe him? Would she accept his apology? He'd been sincere about it. He'd meant it. He never wanted to hurt her again. And he'd literally just completed an arduous quest to, in part, uphold her honour. Not that she knew anything about that yet, but he felt like it should have counted in his favour anyway. In the end, he'd said the words. What more would she want from him? After about a minute of silently waiting, Santa couldn't stand it any longer.
Do you have anything to say?
Nick.
She looked down at a vein of tropical sand lingering in a crease on their bedsheets and scowled.
Like you said, I've been waiting for this apology for decades. Literally. I want to forgive you, but I can't just ignore that you've waited this long to tell me.
He nodded and rubbed her shoulder with his hand.
That's fair. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just hope you'll get there eventually.
She nodded as well.
Eventually, I know I will. I can assure you of that. But I don't ever want anything like this to happen again. Do you understand? We may be immortal, but decades wasted is far too long.
I agree.
Santa smiled. He took her hands in his.
I love you, Shelley Claus.
She gave him a small smile.
I love you too, Nick.
On the bright side, you won't have to leave that catalogue lying out on the bed later today. You can just throw it away.
She eyed him.
How did you know I was going to do that?
He grinned and winked at her.
I'm Santa Claus. I know when people are naughty and nice, sometimes even before they do it.
A faint but genuine grin curled the edges of Shelley's lips.
Don't push your luck, Nick.
Santa shrugged, and Shelley shoved him out of the bed.
Go on. I've got to clean these sheets thanks to whatever you've gotten yourself into this time. And since you're up, you might as well get some work done. Tonight's the big night after all. And make sure you eat breakfast. It's the best way to jumpstart your metabolism in the morning.
Yes, darling.
Santa planted a kiss on her cheek and grabbed Cherry and headed toward their bedroom door. Santa showered, shook the sand out of his clothes and boots, and ate a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, steak, bacon, hash browns with cheese and onions, and more bacon. Then he pulled on his now red travelling coat, cuts, holes, burns, and all. He clasped his black leather belt around it, opened the front door to his house, and stepped into the howling landscape. His grip tightened on Cherry as he squinted into the darkness. Given the changes to the timeline, he didn't think he'd need her, but he'd reloaded her and brought her along anyway.
Just in case.
Arctic wind whipped tiny granules of snow that stung his cheeks, nose, and forehead. Were it not for his home's well-lit exterior and the LED lamp posts that lined his path, he would have been all but blind.
Father Time and mutated dinosaurs aside, I miss the Bermuda Triangle.
Santa hadn't braved a blizzard like this in decades. He wouldn't have tonight either, but since it was Christmas Eve, he didn't really have a choice. He headed straight for the stable. He had to be sure that he'd reversed all of the harm Father Time had caused. Santa clamped down on the door handle and pulled, and the door hinges creaked amid the animal noises emanating from within. He stepped inside. He switched on the lights, and the fluorescent tubes that stretched along the center of the ceiling flickered, then they glowed just as they ought to. Santa smiled. As if on cue, every single one of his reindeer poked their heads over the half-doors that penned them into their respective stalls. He counted them mentally just to be sure.
Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen.
Santa smiled again.
All there. All safe.
As Santa walked toward Vixen's stall, a faint pink light emanated from inside it. He pulled the door open, greeted Vixen with half a carrot, and watched as a familiar young reindeer trotted out of the darkness behind her. Little brown nubs on the top of his head marked where his antlers would soon grow. Rudolph had survived as well, and he looked as healthy and strong as he had in the alternate timeline. More importantly, Rudolph's nose glowed red, just like his mother's did. Santa smiled wide. He truly hadn't failed after all. Between the full complement of reindeer, Rudolph and Vixen's combined light, use of the timepiece, and two more key elements, Santa would ensure Christmas happened on time this year, blizzard or no blizzard. Santa smirked as he fed Rudolph a celebratory carrot of his own.
You're coming with me tonight, little fella. We've got work to do.
Hours later, the workshop buzzed with last-minute preparations, list-checking not once but twice, and festive energy in abundance for Christmas Eve. Frank Sinatra's Christmas album crooned classic tunes in the background as elves wrapped up toys and packed them into neat rows behind Santa's sleigh in preparation for his departure. Santa gave a jolly laugh.
Ho, ho, ho! Sure beats zombie polar bears running amok.
Fiddlesticks and Bibidoo approached from Santa's left, and he nodded to them.
Looks like we're on schedule.
Ahead, actually.
Fiddlesticks grinned and thumbed his suspenders.
Weather aside, it's going to be a great Christmas Eve.
I've got the weather covered. I'm making an adjustment to the reindeer lineup. Please have Crandall harness Rudolph into the lead spot just ahead of Vixen. Their combined light will guide my sleigh tonight.
Santa rubbed his hands together.
For now, I've got to make a visit to an old friend.
Fiddlesticks's brow furrowed.
A friend? On Christmas Eve?
Santa just patted Fiddlestick's back and headed toward the Arctic cats parked outside.
See you later,
Bibidoo called. As in the previous timeline, Snoot didn't let Santa inside at first, but eventually he caved when Santa held up the Christmas light whip Snoot had made, or would eventually make.
Where the frost did you get that?
Snoot ushered Santa inside and glowered at him.
Let me guess. Spies. First your crony Twiddledicks fired me, then you sent someone to steal my designs for a Christmas-themed whip?
Snoot's rant continued as he pointed an accusatory finger at Santa.
I bet you're trying to underbid me in working with the China National Space Administration, too, now that you've got my revolutionary rocket designs, but they'll never work with a talentless hack like—
Easy, easy.
Santa held up his hands, all too happy to ignore Snoot's words.
I didn't send any spies. I don't have any rocket designs, and I don't want you fired. I want you back, and this whip is the proof. It's sort of a long story on how I came to acquire it, but suffice it to say, I'm giving it to you as a token of goodwill, and I'd like to invite you to accompany me on my deliveries this evening.
Snoot pulled his black, red-lensed goggles up to his forehead and stared at Santa with wide eyes.
What did you say?
Santa grinned.
You heard me. I want you to join me tonight.
But you don't let anyone come with you on your deliveries anymore. Not since Krampus—
I'm making an exception. I believe you'll prove incredibly valuable to the success of Christmas this year and in the years to come, Snoot. I want to discuss it with you one-on-one this evening.
Snoot squinted at him and shook his head slightly.
You don't even know me. A week ago, you couldn't have cared less that I was getting fired from your precious slave shop. And now you're in my living room asking me to help you with your annual Christmas present drop? Something reeks north of Denmark, if you ask me.
Santa smiled.
Same old Snoot. I know you better than you may think, Snoot. Come with me tonight, and I'll explain everything.
Snoot hesitated.
I understand your skepticism, believe me. But I also know that there's nothing you love more than Christmas. Sure, you're in talks with NASA, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and SpaceX about your Star of Wonder prototype. But your heart is for the holidays.
Santa gave him a wink.
You are spying on me.
Snoot pointed at him again.
How else could you possibly know all of this?
Santa just shrugged.
As I said, I'll explain along the way. Will you join me?
Snoot folded his arms and eyed Santa. Christmas morning, 4:30 a.m. Samoan time, North Pole. With the sleigh fully loaded and all the reindeer fastened into their harnesses, Santa approached Rudolph. He stroked Rudolph's back a few times as Crandall, no longer a bloody one-handed mess, approached.
I think he's still too young for this kind of trip, boss.
Crandall stood there with his hands on his hips. Santa grinned.
I know you do, Crandall, but you'll have to trust me on this one, all right?
Crandall nodded.
Whatever you say, it's your gig.
Santa patted Rudolph's neck. and Rudolph bobbed his head up and down. Then Santa took his spot inside the sleigh and tucked Cherry between the seats. The sleigh's fine wooden dashboard lacked the fancy Star of Wonder display from the alternate timeline, but it would suffice for tonight. It certainly had for the last several centuries. Snoot plopped down next to him, looking over the sleigh with rapt fascination, but also a critical eye.
I've always thought your setup was kind of low-tech. If you're ever interested in an upgrade, we should talk.
Oh, we will. I assure you we will.
The bag of toys weighed down the back of the sleigh, but no more than any other Christmas Eve. His team of reindeer could more than handle it. Shabalap approached and handed Santa his bullwhip, and Pellywiggle and Wismelda, still as cantankerous with each other as ever, ran over the final toy counts with him for boys and girls respectively. Everything checked out. Santa nodded to Harpic and Quinaglow, who stood near the huge doors at the far end of the workshop, and they hauled them open. A rush of frigid air and snowflakes cascaded inside. Along with the snow drifted a black and white form. As the thing soared closer, Santa noticed it had a vivid orange beak and 2 wings. A puffin. It swooped over and landed on the sleigh in front of Snoot and squawked, much to Santa's delight.
Oh, look at him!
Snoot squealed.
Aren't you adorable?
The puffin hopped down from the sleigh's dashboard and into Snoot's lap, and the way it nuzzled its head against his chest left no doubt in Santa's mind that it was, in fact, the same puffin from the old timeline.
Oh my goodness! I'm definitely keeping you, and I shall name you Puffsworth.
Santa beamed.
That's nice, but I think Professor Puffsworth has a nicer ring to it, don't you?
Snoot's eyes widened.
Brilliant! Professor Puffsworth it shall be. He's coming with us tonight, by the way.
Puffsworth cooed.
I expected nothing less.
Santa gave him a wink and patted the puffin's head. He cracked his whip just above the reindeers' heads. They trudged forward slowly at first, but they gained speed as they advanced. They lurched through the doors and into the cold, blustery night. As the reindeer ascended, Santa directed them to circle around the workshop and his house, all while Snoot whooped and hollered with holiday cheer. Below them, Shelley waved up at the sleigh from their doorway. She wore the biggest smile he'd seen from her in decades. His heart warm, even amid the howling Arctic winds, Santa waved back and directed the reindeer south, towards Samoa. With Puffsworth and Snoot aboard, and Shelley no longer angry with him, it seemed everything had worked out well. Father Time's mayhem had been totally reversed. Yet Santa couldn't help but wonder about Evalia. The last he'd seen of her, she'd been on her knees with blood pulsing from her neck and her arm frozen and shattered on the sand. Even though she was probably fine, he couldn't shake the sick sensation in his gut from that memory. He turned to Snoot as they flew.
Say, don't you have a cousin, a dark elf named Evalia?
Snoot twisted and eyed him.
How in the holly hell do you know all of this? You got connections at the NSA or something?
Like I said, I'll explain it to you soon. For now, I'm just wondering how she's doing.
That's a weird question. Have you two met?
Santa nodded. We did once.
She's fine, I guess.
Snoot dug an iPhone out of his pocket and popped open his photos. As he scrolled through them, he said,
She's such a trip. Always has these grand adventures. Meets the most interesting people. I found this one on her profile earlier this morning.
He held the screen up so Santa could see it. A tabloid headline, written in Russian, read, "Who is Putin's new girlfriend?" Beneath it, Evalia stood beside Vladimir Putin at a fancy Christmas Eve gala, clad in an exotic black dress that hugged her body like a second skin.
Ho, ho, ho!
Epilogue. Date, Christmas morning. Time, 11:54 a.m. Location, an unknown island in the Bahamas. As soon as Santa went through his portal, the other portals left over from Father Time's explosive death began to drift away from the island. Some wandered north. Others drifted south. Some traveled east. Some migrated west. Some sank underground or into the sea, and some ascended to the sky. A handful of portals stayed with the island. From one of them billowed tropical heat, not unlike that of the island itself, but it was an older air, with a totally different aroma to it, a prehistoric aroma. Then a scaly foot stepped through the portal onto the sand. A large reptilian head, crowned with feathers, accompanied the step, and the creature tentatively sniffed at the new world it had discovered. A male Utah raptor, 15 feet long and weighing nearly a ton, fully emerged from the portal and stalked toward the scent of meat. It sniffed out Rudolph's reindeer blood in the sand, near where Santa's sleigh had once been, and 2 types of elven blood nearby as well. But to its dismay, it found no bodies anywhere. No meat. Except for one. Sort of. A head, pale and with a white beard, missing the rest of its body, lay in the sand. It was Father Time's head. The raptor, thinking only with its stomach, tested the head with a cautious nibble and a lick. It tasted unlike anything else the dinosaur had ever consumed, but meat was meat and the raptor was hungry. It opened its mouth wide and chomped down on the head, crushing the skull with its powerful jaws. Then it swallowed the mangled head in one bite. The instant the head hit the raptor's stomach, everything began to change. The raptor's eyes widened as power coursed through its body, changing it, rewiring it and transforming it. White light emanated from under the raptor's skin, tracing every vein and artery in its arms, legs, tail and chest. When the light reached its head, the raptor's eyes emitted a brilliant white glow. The raptor opened its mouth and loosed a furious roar as it achieved sentience. Within seconds, his intellect far surpassed mere human intelligence and self-awareness. He came to understand the nature of the world, of the cosmos, of the universe. He came to understand the nature of time and space itself. Now aware of his power, the raptor concentrated and tested his abilities. Light flashed, and the raptor vanished. Then he reappeared atop a wrecked panzer tank, which he recognized as a World War II-era weaponized vehicle. Through the memories housed in Father Time's now digesting head, the raptor also understood how the tank had gotten there, and how it had been damaged. All at once, the horror of history seized the raptor's mind, but not that of World War II. Instead, he saw asteroids, ice ages, and other natural disasters ravaging the world and wiping out his kind many, many years prior. The scenes played in his memory, as if he'd personally watched them happen, and perhaps a part of him actually had. Millions, no, billions of his fellow dinosaurs had perished because of freak accidents caused by nature, and in the countless years that followed, mankind emerged as the Earth's dominant species. To add insult to injury, modern man now refined the remnants of the raptor's fellow dinosaurs to use as fuel for their noxious machines. Mankind displayed the bones of dinosaurs and other prehistoric beasts in museums, universities, and even airports. They performed crude experiments on prehistoric DNA with the hope of reviving the dinosaurs like in Jurassic Park. But the horrors didn't stop there. As a result of mankind's dominance over the planet, the oceans were more polluted than ever, the air quality was increasingly worsening, and the planet as a whole was degrading at an alarming rate. Despite their supposedly superior existence and intellect, mankind was ruining the world. The raptor's home. It all made him furious. Mankind, the raptor decided, had done enough damage. They'd had their chance. The world didn't need mankind, nor did it need mankind's inventions and pollutions. Rather than allowing the planet to succumb to mankind's abuses, the raptor would enable the planet to fight back. But in order to fight back, the planet needed an army of dinosaurs. The raptor turned to face the portal from which he had entered. In another flash of white light, he vanished from atop the panzer and reappeared before the rift in time and space. He extended one of his taloned hands, and using his newfound powers, expanded the portal even wider. It stretched and yawned open until it loomed nearly as wide as the island itself, and it reached dozens of feet high, more than tall enough for even the largest dinosaurs to enter through. When he finished widening the portal, The raptor called out to his fellow dinosaurs with his mind. They were so unlike him, dumb and base creatures with small brains. But they were of his kind, and he loved them nonetheless. He beckoned them to come to the portal, to this new version of their world that would sustain them indefinitely, free of impending world-ending natural disasters. He beckoned them to come and claim a new existence. They would live, he knew, if he could bring them here. All they had to do was take the Earth from mankind, and they would once again become the planet's dominant species. Words formed in the raptor's throat. He had never spoken before, but now he could. He could do almost anything now.
Come unto me.
The words scraped out of his reptilian throat in a manner of speaking he knew to be archaic for this modern time, but he rather enjoyed the flow and lilt of his words.
Come unto me, and I shall grant thee new life. I shall give thee a new world.
On the other side of the portal, throngs of his fellow dinosaurs had gathered. Towering behemoths and stout multi-ton quadrupeds, grand flying reptiles and scurrying ground dwellers, docile herbivores and ravenous carnivores, including more raptors like him. The raptor had his army, and this was only the beginning. He could open more portals. He could summon more dinosaurs. He could call forth a dinosaur for each of the nearly 8 billion people on this miserable planet, and then even more after that. A force of that size could easily retake the Earth and establish the second rule of the dinosaurs. And he, the Time Raptor, would lead them.